Chapter 317. The girl's smile disappeared in a flash. When the surrounding holy light believers discovered her presence and were ready to concentrate their firepower to eliminate this sneak attacker, the girl had already retrieved her flying sword, turned into a rainbow and quickly flew to another corner. Her speed was so fast that even the high-order professions present were stunned and failed to catch her. Dozens of holy light spells fell on the place where the girl originally stood, shattering the illusion of the rainbow flower, but it was useless. Looking from above, the dense crowd of holy light religion camps seemed to have been dug out, forming a vacuum. The more than 100 priests, including more than 15 middle-order priests, didn't even have the room to resist before they were abruptly stirred into dregs. Judging from the girl's aura, she hasn't even crossed the threshold of high-order profession, but the power of her sword strike was close to the eruption of an intermediate high-order profession, which was simply appalling. However, whether it was 9 regions or Western continent, it was not uncommon to see geniuses whose real strength was far stronger than what they appeared to be. Although the middle-order and high-order profession strength were appalling, they were not without precedent. Therefore, after the initial brief consternation, holy light religion quickly responded. Considering that the speed of the 9 regions girl was too fast for the average person to intercept, 2 high-order holy knights pulled out from the battlefield and followed the girl's figure. Generally speaking, to deal with this kind of young genius with amazing explosive power, the experienced and prudent high-order profession was the most suitable. As long as they didn't reveal any flaw in the young genius' endless explosive means, the gap in the final stage would soon be revealed. In contrast, the holy knights with their full body armor and amazing physical strength were naturally the most suitable to undertake this task. The 2 high-order holy knights abandoned their opponents and chased after the girl. They were blessed with holy light spells, so their speed was astonishingly fast. Although the 9 regions girl's movement was fast, she was inevitably slowed down by the holy light believers. When the holy knights got close, they immediately noticed the weakness of the 9 regions girl. Her attack power and speed were indeed unparalleled, but her defense was not strong. Just now, she didn't dare to take the holy light spells of the several middle-order priests head-on. Instead, she changed her course of action to evade. To deal with such an opponent, as long as they cooperated with others to limit her action and then put up a good defense so that she wouldn't have the opportunity to take advantage of them, victory would be at hand. Ahead, the holy light cage. A paladin shouted loudly, ordering a team of priests to collectively release holy light spells to create an insurmountable barrier in front of them. This kind of holy light cage didn't have any special characteristics other than being extremely sturdy. However, when the girl saw it, she casually waved a crimson-red sword chi and punched a hole in the wall of light. She passed through the hole without slowing down at all. Just how strong is this guy's explosive power? The holy knight was shocked. The holy light spell released by dozens of priests could not stop her at all. Instead, it was used by her. The hole created by the young lady was not big enough for a woman to pass through, but the 2 fully armored holy knights could not pass through. They could only use their swords to shatter the entire cage. Seizing this opportunity, the girl once again transformed into a streak of rainbow light and rushed into an area with a high concentration of priests. She unleashed a deadly rainbow flower and reaped more than 100 lives. Seeing this scene, the 2 holy knights were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They immediately activated the teleportation spell on their boots, trying to appear directly beside the girl and then, one on the left and one on the right, exerting pressure on her from different directions. Using the spell on their boots would interfere with the protection of the armor for a short period of time. However, the 2 holy knights couldn't care too much about it at this time. However, the 2 holy knights' figures flashed, and just as they finished the teleportation, they felt a darkness above their heads as a behemoth covered them. Their vision turned black and then they didn't know what happened. The hundreds of people around them watched as a mottled dog suddenly swelled 100 times, turned into a ferocious giant beast, and then swallowed 2 high-order professions in one gulp without spitting out any residue. Oh, this is the infant of the devastator demon wolf Fenrir? This was the first time that Faceless One, in the midst of a fierce battle, paid attention to the battlefield below. Whether it was the appearance of Wang Lu or the eruption of Lu Li, he didn't pay too much attention to them. However, when the devastator demon wolf also appeared on the battlefield, Faceless One could no longer continue to ignore it. It was not that the infant of the devastator demon wolf was more powerful than the previous several people, but rather the successive emergence of variables caused the quantitative change to trigger a qualitative change. The role of Wang Lu, Lu Li, and the devastator demon wolf, any one of them could be equivalent to an intermediate high-order profession. Moreover, there were less than 20 intermediate high-order professions in the entire battlefield. The sudden addition of these 3 people was enough to break the balance. In fact, the 2 outbursts of Lu Li alone had greatly shaken the Holy Light religion, and then the World Destroyer Demon Wolf made its move, which directly swallowed the 2 high-order Holy Knights. The surrounding hundreds of priests and Holy Knights were affected and dared not to move forward. The crumbling defensive line of Dragon City guards immediately got a chance to breathe. Almost no one in 9 regions recognized the devastator Demon Wolf, but in the Western continent, it was not difficult to hear its name if one was knowledgeable. The Demon Wolf Fenrir, who had just entered adulthood, was already equivalent to legendary level. When it fully matured, it could even step into the realm of God, which was a nightmarish opponent. Fenrir's strongest ability was to swallow. Anything that was swallowed by it was a dead end. The strength of this infant was barely equivalent to a low-order high-order profession. However, once the sneak attack was successful, even a Holy Knight with amazing defense would be instantly killed after being swallowed by it. With it around, except for a few people, no one could be considered safe. Coupled with the legend that the devastator Demon Wolf once swallowed the god, the blow to the morale was simply fatal. If left alone, although it was not certain that Dragon City guards could successfully turn the tables, it would, after all, add a lot of variables to the battle. However, in Holy Light religion, who could deal with these sudden changes? Are you trying to force me to make my move? Faceless One nodded. Very well, as you wish. The next moment, Faceless One suddenly disappeared from the battlefield. Bedivere, who was suppressed to the point that he could hardly breathe, was immediately relieved. For a long time he was at a loss. At the same time, just as Lu Li retrieved her flying sword, she saw a tall, white-robed faceless man in front of her. Regarding this person, her senior brother had already told her enough. Without hesitation, the 12 flying swords that formed the brilliant sword array fully erupted. At the same time, she also held her strongest killing move, the immortal sword Skybreaker, in her hand. That horrifying life-taking rainbow was actually far from Lu Li's strongest means. The full power of the brilliant sword heart was enough to make an intermediate high-order profession tremble in fear. However, for a high-order faceless one, no matter how brilliant Lu Li's means were, it was just a child's play. The level difference was too big. He didn't even need to pay attention to the opponent's attack. With his holy robe and physical protection he could resist it. And Lu Li couldn't even touch the aftermath of his attack. Merely the power of his move was enough to make Lu Li's breathing difficult and her jade mansion agitated. However, the moment Faceless One made his move, an exceptionally familiar heavy sword light shone in front of him. Wang Lu mysteriously appeared in front of Faceless One. His 3-feet sword defense propped up an unbreakable barrier. Faceless One's move suddenly slowed down for a moment. It was as if he didn't want to confront the non-phase sword light head-on. Of course, no matter how powerful the defense of a middle-order profession was, it was still a joke in front of a high-order profession. It was equivalent to the power of a deity stage cultivator, which was by no means something that a Shudan stage cultivator like Wang Lu could contend against. However, Faceless One seemed to be afraid of something. There was a trace of hesitation when he made his move. However, the next moment, Faceless One stretched out his right hand, and a supreme mysterious method condensed in his palm. And just at this time Wang Lu suddenly took a step forward. His non-phase sword, which was originally in an absolute disadvantage, unexpectedly took the initiative to find the opponent. The collision of power that spanned countless stages broke out. In one strike, hundreds of crisp cracking sounds were connected into a string, as if countless precious magical treasures were crushed at the same time. At the same time, the light and shadow behind Wang Lu distorted, revealing Bai Shishuan's slightly flushed face. This was Wang Lu's well-prepared all-out blow. Relying on the treasures he brought from 9 regions as well as the countless treasures he collected in the Western continent, plus Bai Shishuan's full help, he was able to launch a cross-stage non-phase nameless sword. Even if the opponent was a high-order profession, it could still rebound once but only once. If the cost of this strike was converted into spirit stones, it would be at least in the millions or tens of millions. However, if the opponent was a high-order profession, it was difficult to measure whether it was worth it or not. Not to mention that the core figure of Holy Light religion was Faceless One. As long as Faceless One was defeated, this war would immediately be won. Buying the victory of a war with millions of spirit stones was simply a big profit. Therefore Wang Lu had been planning for a long time and did not hesitate to launch this sword strike. Non-phase sword was the first to collide with Faceless One's divine technique. The power that was several stages higher than Wang Lu's surged violently like a surging tide. At that moment, Wang Lu clearly realized that if he relied on himself, Even 100 lives would not be enough. However, now that he had the backing of millions of spirit stones, he had the power to fight against the surging tide. Kneel down in front of the money player. At this moment, Wang Lu even burned his innate vitality. His non-phase sword expanded by millions of times, turning into a dam that was enough to block the tide. The next moment, the two forces fiercely collided. Wang Lu did not have a 100% chance of winning, not even half. The opponent was, after all, a high-order profession, the number one person below the legendary level in the church. If the opponent wanted to kill him at all costs, millions of spirit stones might not be enough. However, there was no such thing as a free win in this world. If he didn't go all out, it was impossible to win. Victory and defeat were decided in an instant. The ferocious waves crashed into the dam and then rolled back. This sword strike actually gave Wang Lu the upper hand. Nameless Sword's counterattack power was displayed to the extreme. The platinum light was forced back by the sword of Mount Kuan, completely engulfing Faceless One's pale figure. On the battlefield, Wang Lu stood with his sword in hand. His body slightly trembled due to the excessive release of magical power. The tip of the sword of Mount Kuan was stained with Faceless One's blood, but Faceless One had disappeared without a trace, as if he had completely evaporated. He actually won this sword strike. However, there was not even the slightest smile on Wang Lu's face. The victory was too easy. The attack that he prepared with millions of spirit stones seemed to have fallen into the air. Faceless One's momentum was menacing, but his momentum was weak. The power of his attack was only 1/10 of the expected. Encountering Wang Lu's millions of spirit stones, it immediately collapsed. It was simply a joke. Although Faceless One had indeed turned into ashes before his eyes, Wang Lu really didn't think that he had won. Sure enough, the next moment, Faceless One's laughter came from afar. Haha, what an eye-opening sword strike. I'll give you this avatar, and then I'll kindly accept Marina and her daughter. Wang Lu helplessly sighed. He was indeed worthy to be the church's sharp knife, not that easy to be fooled. Just now, when the two sides collided, Faceless One had a higher chance of winning. However, he simply disdained to gamble, so he would rather sacrifice an avatar. Taking advantage of the absence of Wang Lu, his real body directly went to rob Marina and her daughter. The key to this war was Bedivere, the tenacious high-order knight of the Round Table, not the variables like Wang Lu, Luli, and Fenrir. Faceless One was always absolutely calm at any time, so he could always find the flaws of the opponent and take advantage of them. Right now, Marina and her daughter were unprotected. Bedivere was still somewhat stunned in the sky, completely without the ability to respond. After a breath's time, Faceless One's figure reappeared in the sky, but this time he was carrying a person in each of his hands. The petite one was Irene, and the plump one was Marina. Bedivere, admit defeat. Faceless One lightly said, save me some strength, I'll give you some leeway. At this time, Bedivere was like a dried-up oil lamp, barely able to support himself from falling down. Perhaps he still had the ability to perish together with Faceless One, but to save people from the other side was already a fantasy. However, even with Faceless One as a hostage, Bedivere still refused to waver. He spat out a pained sound and simply disdained to answer. Faceless One mentioned Marina and Irene. I know you don't care about their life and death, but women always have things that are more important than life and death. You should believe that I can do it. Bedivere's complexion was gloomy, but inwardly he had already made a decision. His eyes reluctantly swept over his daughter, as if he wanted to keep her figure in his heart. Irene, facing her father's eyes, tried to make a strong expression, but she couldn't help but burst into tears. The little girl loudly shouted, Dad, I'm not afraid of anything. Bedivere's eyes became hot, and he had to turn his head sideways. However, the next moment Bedivere was suddenly stunned because he saw that in the other hand of Faceless One Marina Sheech. At the same time, Faceless One also noticed the abnormality. His figure flashed and was about to leave. However, he was one step too late. Marina, who was held in his right hand, moved incredibly fast. A heavy sword appeared out of thin air and pierced Faceless One's chest. Under the broken sunlight, Marina's brown hair gradually showed a golden luster. Chapter 318. In the military camp area of Dragon City, thousands of people were divided into two camps, fighting fiercely. The Dragon City guards were on one side and the priests, holy knights, and judges of the church were on the other side. Ever since the holy sword of divine judgment opened the curtains of the war had already lasted for more than half a day. During this period, this war alarmed countless foreign forces. Around Dragon City, more than 10 cities all had people watching the battle. Some were city lords themselves and some were trusted aides of the city lords. In addition, forces such as the Shadow Brotherhood and the Mercenary Association were also involved to varying degrees. Everyone knew that the outcome of this war would greatly affect the strategic pattern of Bretonnia for the next few decades or even hundreds of years. Of course, the victory of Holy Light religion seemed to be without suspense, but how much resources would it consume to annihilate Dragon City guards, to annihilate the Knight of the Round Table Bedivere from the Night King era to the present? Would the dominance of Holy Light religion in Bretonnia be stronger or weaker? Would the forces of power that had dealings with Dragon City be affected? If Dragon City somehow managed to win the war, what should they do next? Would the Holy Light Church abandon Bretonnia? Or should they face the chaos in the east and destroy the remnants of Dragon City first? If Holy Light religion intended to give up this land, what would happen to those forces that were close to Holy Light religion? After that, other than waiting here quietly for the results, perhaps he could personally participate in it and reap some benefits? For example, the Holy Light religion has obviously come out in full force, so when they besiege the Dragon City guards, their own rear must be very empty. In the past, people only dared to covet the Holy Light religion's treasure house, which they did not dare to rashly touch, was now wide open. Another example, Dragon City, as the most prosperous city in Bretonnia, had too many hidden treasures. Now that most of the civilians had fled to the outskirts of the city, there were too many ownerless items in the city. On the other hand, regardless of whether Bedivere or Holy Light religion won in the end, after the war, there must be a period of recuperation and restoration of order. This Dragon City could not be abandoned. In that case, if anyone had dared to commit crimes in the city, they would definitely be punished afterwards. During the period when people were committing crimes, those who helped to maintain order in the city would, of course, gain the friendship of the victors, no matter which side was the victor. With so many possibilities, it was truly difficult to make a decision. All the forces had their own inclination, but they also had their own concerns. Although this war started in a hurry, it was still the highest-level war in Bretonnia in recent decades. There were nearly 100 high-grade professions participating in the war, which was nothing more than a common war between nations. In this game of chess, any move could bring about extreme consequences. Either one could enjoy endless glory and wealth, or die without a burial and never be able to rise again. During most of the day, the various families and sects made their own judgments. For the sake of safety, some decided to only watch from the sidelines and not personally enter the battlefield. There were also some who were extremely daring and sent people into Dragon City to try and take advantage of the situation. Some, relying on their strength, tried to join the side of Dragon City and Holy Light religion to help in the fight. However, it was different from what many people imagined. Most of the people who personally participated were from small forces of power. The influential forces of power around Dragon City all chose to watch from the sidelines. The bigger the power, the more cautious they had to be. There were too many suspicious points in this battle, and it was far more complicated than it seemed. For example, the simplest question was, which side should one support in a battle between two sides? Most people would probably choose Holy Light religion. They felt that even if there was no timely help, the icing on the cake would not be wrong. However, the news that came out of the city from these big forces made people hesitant. The one who provoked the war in Dragon City was a madman from Holy City. That madman had no bottom line and did not follow the rules. With a few words, he could frame the loyal followers of Holy Light religion as traitors, and with a raise of his hand, he could make the heads of hundreds of priests fall to the ground. If such a person were to take charge of Dragon City in the future, who knew what he would do? For example, he could force the trade association to give up all their property. If they refused, it would be considered as disrespecting Holy Light religion. He could then send a judge to forcibly expropriate the property of the merchants and burn the leader of the resistance at the stake. This kind of thing was not something that Holy Light religion had never done before. Nowadays, a large part of the prosperity of Dragon City was due to the popularity of Archbishop Rowan, which made people feel at ease to invest and produce here. If it were Faceless One who would feel at ease? And would the higher-ups of Holy Light religion really feel at ease to let such a madman take charge of Dragon City? Perhaps after the war he would be recalled back to Holy City, and the church would send a new archbishop. At that time they would have to start a new public relations process. And even if they tried their best to curry favor at this time, whether the new archbishop would appreciate it or not was another matter. Because of these uncertain factors, the big forces basically chose to watch from the sidelines. There were many good shows in Dragon City, and they did not disappoint. 30 miles outside the city at the foot of the snow-capped mountain, a great knight sighed. Dragon City is indeed worthy to be the #1 city in Bretonia. The strength of this city is at least equivalent to half of Bretonia. The powerful people in this land seem to have been gathered by Dragon City guards and Holy Light religion. Compared to them, the other forces are not even qualified to serve as foils. This great knight was the son of the city master of Riddle City, and also the strongest person in Riddle City. He has always been proud of his middle-order high-order profession strength. However, witnessing this meat grinder like war, the great knight's heart was filled with a strong sense of frustration. In just half a day, the number of middle-order high-order professions that died were as many as 4 or 5 people, and the strength of many low-order high-order professions on the battlefield was not inferior to him. He, the strongest person in Riddle City, after entering the battlefield, perhaps even his shadow could not be found. Ha, if Mr. Viscount says so, wouldn't our blue tile city be even more miserable? I, the guardian of the city, am just a low-order high-order profession. Put in that battlefield, I'm just a small fry. The great knight sneered and ignored the magician next to him. That guy has always been known for his sinister and cunning character. Although he seemed to be a low-order high-order profession, the number of middle-order high-order professions that died in his hands was quite a lot. If he were to face him, his odds of winning would only be 50-50. Seeing that the great knight ignored him, the magician grinned and said, "Moreover, after this battle, no matter who wins or loses, Dragon City's vitality will be greatly damaged, and its status will certainly plummet. Look, Dragon City Guard's resistance is so tenacious. Even if Holy Light religion wins, at least half of them will die. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us small fries." The great knight frowned and looked at the distant battlefield. Suddenly, a burst of alarm sounded in his heart, and he hastily took a few steps to the side. Then a sharp sword chi came toward him, cutting the ground under the great knight's feet and the mountain behind him, leaving a bottomless crack. The magician sucked in a mouthful of cold air. The Dragon City Master's sword chi is really overbearing. Even though we're so far away, its power still hasn't diminished. I think we should retreat a bit more. The great knight didn't answer. He just stared at the distant sky, tenaciously fighting Bedivere. The bloody figure of the Knights of the Round Table fighting fiercely aroused a strong resonance in the great knight's mind. After a long time, the great knight subconsciously asked, "Seriously, which side do you want to win in your blue tile city?" The magician didn't expect such a question, so he froze for a moment. Seeing that no one was around, he put away his playful expression and somewhat helplessly said, "This kind of thing, I don't have the final say. Just say what you think." The magician looked at the great knight. For most people in Bretonia, this question is not a problem, right? Do you think so? The magician quietly said, 50 years ago, I was a knight just like you. It wasn't until I was hit by an arrow in the knee that I changed my profession to study magic. But to this day, I actually prefer to be a knight. You know, one of the 3 cards in my hand is the Knight Incarnation technique. Many people who tried to deal with me in close combat have died under this move." The great knight froze for a moment. He didn't think that this always insidious magician would actually reveal his card. He couldn't help but laugh. "A magician like you is rare. In Bretonia, it's actually not that rare. This is, after all, the kingdom of knights. Most people have a knight's dream. So, if I can choose, of course I want Bedivere to win. I remember that Dragon City and your Blue Tile City once had a conflict." The magician said, "The last city master that I served was killed by Bedivere, so I actually want Bedivere to die. But even if he dies, he should die in the hands of a knight, not in the hands of a sinister and ruthless swindler." After a pause, he continued, "Of course, given that there's no knight in Bretonia that can kill him, it's barely acceptable for him to die in the hands of us magicians." The great knight sighed again. "Bretonia should be the kingdom of knights, and I'm afraid Dragon City is the last fortress of the knight spirit. If it falls today, the soul of Bretonia will also collapse. Yes, but the opponent is so strong, I'm afraid Bedivere won't be able to hold on for long. That faceless one of Holy Light religion is too powerful." The great knight said, "He's at the peak of advanced high order, half a step into legendary realm. Nowadays only a few people in the entire Bretonia can compare with him. I'm afraid only the strongest few of the Knights of the Round Table, or the Night King himself, can defeat him." While speaking, in the sky above Dragon City, Bedivere and Faceless One once again fiercely confronted each other. The energy surged crazily, which further tore the broken sky. This made the strange phenomenon in the sky even more chaotic. "Tiske, these 2 people are really powerful, they even broke the sky. In broad daylight, I can actually see a meteor." The magician exclaimed and then chuckled and said, "Legend has it that when you see a meteor and make a wish, the wish will come true." The great knight knew that this was just a relaxed expression from the magician, so naturally he wouldn't take it seriously. He just looked at the distant sky above Dragon City, where a meteor would fall from the broken sky from time to time, and then the great knight whispered, "I hope that His Majesty the Night King can come back from the dead and lead Bretonia to reunification." Cough. The magician almost choked. "Isn't your wish too greedy?" However, as soon as his voice fell, there was a decisive change in the battlefield above Dragon City. Holy Maiden Marina, who was held hostage by Faceless One, suddenly twisted her body and pushed her arm. A heavy sword appeared out of thin air in her hand, and then, like a lightning, it pierced into Faceless One's chest. This astonishing change shocked the audience. Thousands of Dragon City guards and holy light priests who risked their lives to fight even simultaneously stopped and looked up at the sky in a daze. Faceless One casually threw away the other hostage and pressed the giant sword in front of his chest with both of his hands. The majestic magical power of holy light was concentrated in his palm, trying to shatter the heavy sword. However, when his magical power collided with the sword, it was surged back, which caused his hands to explode and turn into a cloud of blood mist. At this time, Holy Maiden Marina began to gradually distort. Her tall figure rapidly shrank, and in the blink of an eye, she turned into a petite and exquisite girl. Her brown hair also showed a golden luster. The girl's dark green eyes were filled with a fierce sword intent, and her exquisite nose slightly wrinkled, showing that she was going all out at this time. As for the heavy sword in her hand, although it was covered in blood, its unique shape was clearly revealed. It was a heavy sword that no Bretonia person would mistake. According to legend, the holder of the royal power of Bretonia was the King of Bretonia. Sword in the Stone. Chapter 319. Any qualified Bretonia citizen would not be unfamiliar with the legend of the Sword in the Stone. Its previous and only master was the famous Night King of Bretonia, a peerless martial artist whose power once shook the world. When the Night King was young, he pulled out the Sword in the Stone and began his legendary life. He led the army to successive victories, defeated all the opponents in Bretonia, unified the regime, and established the Night Kingdom that was admired by countless people. Unfortunately, due to a series of internal conflicts, the prosperous kingdom soon fell apart. The King of Knights himself died from serious injuries during the War of Rebellion. Legend has it that the sword of the king, which he wielded, returned to the land of dreams along with his body, never to appear in the world again. That was the punishment of God to the people of Bretonia, punishing them for betraying the noble and flawless king, henceforth living in division and war. Of course, there were many legends about the Night King. Many people firmly believed that he was not dead, but was only temporarily asleep. There were even travelers from the east who said that a long time ago, they had seen the sword in the east. However, most of these rumors were difficult to verify. Now, the only thing that people firmly believed was that only the Night King could use the sword in the stone. It was the sword of the king and also the sword that belonged to the Night King. It could never be given to others. Unless the Night King appeared, the sword in the stone would forever sleep. And now, the sword of the king that had disappeared for 100 years had unexpectedly reappeared in the world. Inside and outside Dragon City, millions of people stared at the sky, staring at the bloody sword that could not hide its sharpness. The Night King's sword in the stone? It's really the sword in the stone? As the proof of the royal power of Bretonia, the sword in the stone had an extraordinary significance for every citizen of Bretonia. When the sword in the stone appeared in the world, every Bretonia citizen who saw it would feel a throbbing desire to submit from the bottom of their heart. That kind of palpitating was unique. As long as one had a love for the land of Bretonia, they would not mistake it. Then, the more important question was, why is the sword in the stone in her hand? Who is she? The sword in the stone was the sword of the Night King. Only the Night King could pick up the sword in the stone. This was a self-evident truth in the land of Bretonia. But now, the sword in the stone was in the hands of a girl. Could it be that she was the Night King? Or, after over 100 years, had the sword in the stone given up on its original master? Countless questions filled their minds, causing them to even forget what they were supposed to do. Within Dragon City's barracks, thousands of people stopped fighting and stared blankly at the changes in the sky. I didn't expect it to be you. Even if his chest was pierced by a heavy sword, Faceless One's voice still remained calm. It was just that, under the serious injury, his voice was so weak that only the two of them could hear it. You really didn't die. In this regard, Aya didn't say a word. She just tried her best to stab the stone sword deeper into Faceless One's body. It could be said that Wang Lu had risked his life for this opportunity. Faceless One was a cautious and cunning person, so how could it be easy to deceive him? Aya once fought against Faceless One. At that time, there was no lack of wise people among her Knights of the Round Table. However, despite their joint efforts, Faceless One still managed to escape. To be honest, this was the first time for Aya to see Faceless One being deceived. If it weren't for Wang Lu using Lu Li Quanzhou and herself as bait, and sacrificing tens of millions of spirit stones to launch a sword strike that was enough to threaten a high-order profession, Faceless One would never hastily change his target to catch Marina and her daughter. And without that haste, it was impossible for him not to see that Marina had been replaced. And without that moment of negligence, Aya wouldn't have been able to stab him with her sword. As a spirit of the departed, her strength was far from returning to its peak. On the basis of trying to suppress the side effects, she could at most erupt with the power of a high-order profession, and only for a moment. With the supreme power of the divine weapon Stone Sword, Aya successfully broke through Faceless One's defense. However, after the heavy sword penetrated his body, Aya found that Faceless One's body had far exceeded the general category. She didn't know what kind of secret method was used to strengthen it. Not only was it as hard as steel, but it also contained an unusually powerful energy. Every time the stone sword penetrated a bit deeper, it could feel a great repulsive force. At the same time, the sword was also under intense pressure. Were it not for the indestructible stone sword, it would inevitably be damaged under this shock. However, Faceless One's resistance only lasted for a moment. Under the increasingly powerful destructive power of the stone sword, the resistance finally collapsed. Faceless One sighed. A large amount of blood gushed out from every pore of his body. Only his pale face remained white. Congratulations, you've defeated the evil Faceless One and won this round. While saying that, Faceless One took out a pen and drew a bloody smiley face on his face. But just like 100 years ago, the war is not over. I look forward to the third fight with you. I hope you can live to that time. With that, Faceless One's blood-stained robe suddenly twisted, as if a void vortex was created inside. Faceless One's entire body and the blood that gushed out were sucked dry by the vortex in a flash, disappearing without a trace. At this time, Aya was like a dried-up oil lamp. When the vortex sucked her, she felt her arms sink, and the stone sword faintly showed signs of falling out of her hand. She hastily pulled it back, but the vortex also disappeared. When her physical strength was exhausted, it suddenly caused a burst of annoyance inside her body. Her vision turned black and she was about to fall. However, just as she was about to fall, a pair of powerful arms supported her. Well done, Aya. Betting everything on you was really the right choice. Aya closed her eyes, feeling the warmth behind her. She didn't want to open her eyes and didn't want to speak. She just faintly smiled and uttered an M sound. AI, killing the big boss with one sword strike. Aya, you're really worthy to be the Night King, domineering. Listening to this obviously exaggerated and insincere praise, Aya was both angry and amused. However, the smile on her face became a bit more intense. Hey, you used too much force just now, so your hair is a bit messy. The ahog on your head is sticking up. Do you want me to help you pluck it? Aya suddenly opened her eyes. Her cold eyes made people shudder. If you dare to touch it, you'll die. Damn, what kind of rule is this? Could it be that the ahog on your head has the same reproductive function as the stamen? I can't touch it? While the two were laughing and joking, a heavy voice suddenly came in. Who are you? Bedivir's whole body was bathed in blood. He was also like a dried-up oil lamp, but he insisted on standing still. His blood-stained eyes stared straight at Aya and the stone sword in her hand. The sword, why is it in your hand? Where is its original owner? What happened to His Majesty the Night King? He's still alive, right? You must know something. The more Bedivere talked, the more excited he became. Under the agitation of his emotions, his control over his body weakened a bit. Several wounds on his body ruptured and blood flowed out. Damn, Bedivere, your head is like a whale that's spurting blood. Bedivere seemed to not hear Wang Lu's exclamation. His eyes were always locked on Aya. What happened to His Majesty the Night King? Please tell me. Aya could hardly face Bedivere's bloodshot eyes. For this loyal and devoted knight, her heart was moved beyond words, but more than that, she felt guilty. If it weren't for her mistake, how could Bretonia fall apart? How could those excellent knights of the Round Table kill each other? How could the heavy burden of protecting the dragon race's bloodline fall on Bedivere alone? Moreover, what could she say about the whereabouts of the Night King? I beg you. Whether you're the descendant of Galahad or someone else, please tell me what happened to my king. Where is he? Bedivere's voice trembled in excitement. I've always missed him. Faced with this situation, Aya's heart was sour. Finally, she couldn't hold back anymore and slightly opened her mouth to say, she's the daughter of the Night King? From the side, Wang Lu coldly said, and then reached out to press Aya's shoulder. He poured his magical power into her so that she could no longer make a sound. It's obvious. In addition to the daughter of the Night King, who else could inherit the sword of the king? In addition to the daughter of the Night King, who else could easily behead Faceless One? Bedivere's whole body was greatly shaken. He incredulously looked at Aya. The daughter of the Night King? His Majesty the Night King left behind a descendant? However, the more Bedivere looked at her, the more he felt that the girl before him had too many similarities with the Night King who once ruled Bretonia. The same blonde hair, the same deep eyes. Although the color of the pupils was different, the heroic spirit between her eyebrows was of the same origin. Then, the most important thing was her power. Although it was still immature compared to the legendary level power of the Night King, the essence was almost exactly the same. Especially when he recalled that sword strike that assassinated Faceless One, it was full of the Night King's style. Even if it was a camouflage sneak attack, it still looked dignified and impressive. After a long silence, Bedivere startled. Then what about His Majesty the Night King? Wang Lu coldly said, so what if you know? Don't you think he's tired enough? Upon hearing this, Bedivere was once again shocked. His mind suddenly returned to the time when he fought under the command of the Night King, back to the time when after endless glory and glory, there was a sharp turn and then a gloomy fall. After a long time, Bedivere's eyes were brimming with tears. Yes, this subordinate is incompetent, I'm ashamed. But I really want to know, is His Majesty okay? Wang Lu said, the person is still there, the will is still there, but everything in the world has its own reincarnation. He has done what he should do. Now he has to wait for his descendant, that is, his daughter. Bedivere asked, does His Majesty want to? Do you still need to ask? Of course, it's to expel the church and restore the country. Expel the church and restore the country? This short sentence contained far too much content. After more than 100 years of infiltration, the church has long been deeply rooted in the land of Bretonia, and the belief in holy light has almost replaced the spirit of chivalry. How could it be easy to expel the church? However, this was the arrogant Night King who always pursued victory. If he succumbed to the power of the church, Bedivere would be disappointed instead. The last question, who are you? Bedivere seriously looked at Wang Lu. From the beginning to the end, everything about Aya was said by him. Aya herself didn't open her mouth, but there was no sign of resistance on her face. Obviously she had a lot of trust in Wang Lu. But, how could Wang Lu be entrusted with such a heavy responsibility by the daughter of His Majesty the Night King? Wang Lu thought for a moment and then said with a smile, City Master is really forgetful. Didn't I tell you earlier I'm her gigolo? Gigolo your sister. Chapter 320. Why? In his primordial spirit, Aya's serious question could not be evaded. Why do you have to weave such a set of lies? Aya was Aya, the proud Night King who would not hide her identity in front of anyone. When she returned to her hometown from the 9 regions, she was ready to face everything in the past, so she didn't need a fake identity to hide anything. Wang Lu sighed. This is not the time for you to show off. It's good to bravely reveal your identity, but do you think Bedivere can accept it? Do you really want your faithful love to break his cognitive world and blow his head? Wang Lu said, believe me, if you insist on claiming that the Night King is a soft girl, Bedivere will definitely kill himself in front of you. Thinking of Bedivere's one-track mind, Aya could do nothing about it. Moreover, do you really think it's a good thing to announce the identity of the Night King? Aya asked, what do you want to say? You've been in Bretonia for some time now, and we can see that the people of this land miss you very much. However, after 100 years of brewing, this nostalgia has reached the point of limitless beautification. It's as if the Night King in those days was perfect, omnipotent, and invincible. Aya laughed. Invincible, that's not wrong. Then why are you still looking for a way to win the war? Why don't you just write a diary so that future generations can admire your political and military achievements? The more you experience war, the more you can see your own shortcomings. But back to the point, what do you think is wrong with the people of Bretonia's nostalgia for me? Excessive beautification will make people unable to accept the reality. If people realize that the perfect king in their fantasy is, in reality, a waste that can't even cook fish-flavored shredded pork, how disappointed would they be? Do you have a problem with my fish-flavored shredded pork? Wang Lu also said, not to mention your current spirit of the brave departed physique, your strength is greatly reduced. Even dealing with a faceless one requires a sneak attack. You simply cannot afford to have too high of an expectation. So, instead of disappointing your followers, it's better to appear as the daughter of the Night King and lower their expectations. That way, even if you're lacking compared to the Night King, people will still understand you, support you, and love you because you're the daughter of the Night King. Aya was stunned for a moment. Is that so? I seem to understand what you mean. Speaking of which, my feelings are really complicated. I've returned to my homeland, and yet I have to play the role of my own daughter. Wang Lu smiled and said, speaking of which, I'm friends with the Night King. Shouldn't you consider calling me uncle in the future? If you seek death you will die, Wang Lu. However, Aya was not interested in arguing with Wang Lu over this verbal battle. It was almost time for her to take a break, and it was time for her to shoulder her responsibilities. After ending their conversation in the sky, Wang Lu, Aya, and Bedivere, the three of them, did not immediately land because the battle in Dragon City was not over. Although on the battlefield, the situation has been completely reversed. After losing Faceless One, Holy Light Religion was like a group of dragons without a leader. Their morale was in chaos. In particular, the archons who were responsible for the battlefield command stopped operating, which made the morale of the Holy Light Religion army even more chaotic. The priests and holy knights were at a loss, scurrying around the battlefield like headless flies. At the same time, the death of Faceless One. Moreover, he was beheaded by Aya in front of everyone, which was a fatal blow to the morale of the Holy Light Religion. Looking down from above, they could clearly see the hesitation and fear in the eyes of the Holy Light Religion believers. Even the almost omnipotent Faceless One was beheaded by the Dragon City guards, who knew how many cards they were hiding. And once a new situation occurred, who else could lead them out of the predicament? For decades, the Holy Light Religion in Dragon City mostly relied on the Archbishop Rowan. Later on, Faceless One appeared and suppressed everything with an absolutely strong stance. However, now that Faceless One was dead and the Archbishop defected, the Holy Light Religion believers were suddenly at a loss. However, although Holy Light Religion suffered a fatal blow, they, after all, still occupied an absolute numerical advantage. Previously, in the last defensive circle, the Dragon City guards suffered a heavy loss, which further widened the gap between them and the Holy Light Religion. Now, it was nearly 6 or 7 times. In this case, a little carelessness might lead to a capsized ship in the gutter. Not to mention that just now, the sudden appearance of the Caliban and the killing of Faceless One by Aya were also a great shock to the Dragon City guards, which also dispersed their fighting spirit. And now, what she had to do was to regroup the Dragon City guards and completely establish the victory. Feeling that her body has slightly recovered her strength, Aya struggled to break free from the embrace of Wang Lu and stood in the air relying on her own strength. Her eyes swept the ground, looking valiant and formidable, which complemented the splendor of the Caliban. With a new identity, Aya actually had a lot to say, but at this moment, there was no time for a long speech. Fortunately, as a former ruler, she was very clear about how to effectively use her time. I am the daughter of the Night King, the legitimate successor of Bretonia. In the name of the Caliban, defeat the enemy in front of me and pick the fruit of victory. With that, Aya waved the Caliban, and the golden light pointed straight ahead. It was a simple action, but it seemed to contain an incredible magic. Looking at the direction where Aya's sword was pointing, a strong surge of excitement surged in the heart of every Bretonia person. It was a memory that came from the depths of their bloodline. In a trance, people seemed to see rows of knights in shining silver armor riding on spirited horses. They held long swords that were polished to the point of not even a speck of dust could be seen in their hands, and sharp dragon spears were fixed on their saddles. In front of them, there were 10 times and 100 times more enemies like a black tide. However, the knights looked solemn and their fighting spirit was unwavering. And in front of the knights, a flawless knight waved his sword high, pointing straight ahead. Knights charge. After 100 years, that battle cry once again exploded in their ears. The Dragon City guards only felt that in their exhausted bodies, their limbs and bones gave birth to infinite strength. Following the direction of the stone sword, they began to run, began to charge. Respond to the call of the king, defeat all enemies that stood in their way. In a trance, the once world-shaking night charge once again appeared in the world. Dragon City guards turned into a sharp knife, deeply piercing into the Holy Light Religion's formation. The final battle finally began, but the result of the battle was already clear at a glance. At the forefront of the battlefield, Lu Li, Bai Shixian, and Quan Zhihua separately pierced into the enemy's formation, quickly harvesting lives with their own means. 36, 37, 38, Luli simultaneously controlled more than 10 flying swords, shuttling back and forth on the battlefield like a gust of lightning. Wherever she went, it was like a sickle cutting wheat, taking away a piece of life. The girl also muttered something, carefully counting her own achievements, for fear of making a mistake. And beside her there was a reign of terror. In fact, when Aya waved the Caliban, launching the night charge after 100 years, the outcome of this war has already been determined. There was no need for the several people to deliberately do anything. The Dragon City guards with boiling morale were enough to tear the enemy into pieces. However, Luli did not forget Wang Lu's entrustment. They were still carrying a difficult task: to collect 999 roses watered with the blood of middle-order professions of Holy Light religion. And this Dragon City battle was the best opportunity to harvest them. In addition to Dragon City, there was no other place in the entire Bretonia that could gather nearly 1,000 middle-order professions. If they didn't kill them now, when would they? In terms of strength, Luli was not at the forefront in the Dragon City battlefield. However, in terms of the ability to kill in a chaotic battle, few could compare to her. The Holy Light religion's morale completely collapsed under the successive blows. They scattered in all directions without any resistance. Luli's high explosive and high mobility advantage was immediately brought into full play. In a moment, Luli almost killed her way through the Holy Light religion's formation. More than 40 middle-order professions died under her sword. As for the rest of the low-order professions, they were countless. However, the girl just stood there for a moment, adjusted her breathing, and then once again turned into a rainbow light and began a new round of killing. According to her senior brother, this battle was the best opportunity to increase her achievement. Once she missed it, she didn't know when there would be a second time. Although the specific explanation was somewhat incomprehensible, Luli at least remembered the most critical point. If you kill 100 people, I will let you eat all the delicacies in Bretonia. With this sentence, Luli had endless motivation to act. In her eyes, the ones who were fleeing in panic were not the priests, holy knights, or the inquisitors, but the fragrant and delicious finger-sucking chicken. Well, that's a good mentality. While Luli was flying on her flying sword, a strange voice suddenly rang in her ears. While killing, your heart can actually be so calm. Is this the special mind cultivation technique of U9 region's people? Luli looked around in surprise but didn't find the speaker. However, feeling that there was no hostility in the voice, she seriously replied, I don't understand what you're talking about. The voice laughed and then asked, do you know that you're killing people? I know it's obvious. Senior brother said that if I kill 100 people, I'll get a reward. Aha, so for you, killing is just a game? The voice said, do you know that each of the dead under your sword is a living being? They have their own life, their own ideals, and their own loved ones. You see the priest with short red hair at the rear left. His name is Kyle, 25 years old this year. He is a talented priest from the countryside. He came to the big city to do odd jobs for the high-order priest in order to accumulate wealth as soon as possible. Because in his hometown, he has a woman that he has been secretly in love with for many years. He planned to propose to her after this battle. The girl actually likes him and has been looking forward to his return. She vowed that the two of them would get married and have children, and live together until their hair turns white. Unfortunately, because of your sword strike just now, all of this is impossible. Luli let out an ohm sound and continued to look for the next target. That girl with long brown hair, Li, is the lead singer of the church choir. She is very beautiful and her voice is very pleasant to hear. Although her character is somewhat vain and delicate, she's actually a devout and kind girl. Every rest day she would carefully take care of the stray cats outside the church, and then watch the believers who come to the church to worship. She actually likes a talented bard. Although the latter is only a civilian, his singing always intoxicated her. The development of the relationship between these two people is destined to be bumpy, but also destined to be touching. Unfortunately, all of this has been ended by you. People will never be able to appreciate Li's singing again, and the bard will never know that there is a beautiful girl who secretly likes him. The soft voice cleverly changed its tone, enticing Luli to involuntarily immerse herself in the story, to appreciate the sadness of the story, to involuntarily surge with remorse and other emotions. Luli was indeed somewhat immersed in it. Her killing action became slower and slower, and eventually she simply stopped, with a puzzled expression on her face. That being the case, Luli puzzledly asked, why would Holy Light religion let them join the battlefield? Isn't it cruel? Luli said, somewhat annoyed. I understand. You want to tell me that Holy Light religion is cruel and inhumane, that they have no bottom line and have harmed many people's lives, right? Very well, I will kill these holy light religion believers to avenge the dead people. That voice exclaimed, "Wait a minute, don't you think your logic is a bit strange?" Lu Li, on the other hand, turned into a ray of light and left. Chapter 321. The war continued until nightfall before it finally came to an end. Unsurprisingly, Dragon City Guards won a complete victory. Since Faceless One was beheaded by Aya, the war actually turned into a one-sided massacre. The Holy Light believers were completely routed, scattering from the center of the military camp area. Dragon City Guards, under the guidance of the Caliban, pursued them all the way. Wrapped in the previous resentment in their heart, they didn't let anyone escape. Finally, they chased them for hundreds of miles outside the city before they gradually stopped. At this point, most of the Holy Light believers who participated in the war were dead. The elites that Holy Light religion accumulated in Bretonia for hundreds of years were gone. The city was covered with rivers of blood. The originally neat and tidy streets were now covered with blood, and everywhere were the bodies of priests in holy robes. At the same time, the fierce fighting would inevitably hurt some innocent people. Not all the civilians were evacuated from the city. There were always some who suffered undeserved disasters. For a time, the smell of blood assailed the nostrils in Dragon City, and the sound of crying shook the sky. The nature of war was cruel. No one was surprised by this scene because if the winner of this war was Holy Light religion, they would not be lenient to Dragon City Guards, and would certainly set off a great purge. Therefore, even though many people could not bear to see this massacre, they were inconvenient to say anything. For example, the former Archbishop Rowan, who was in a very awkward situation, fell into a deep contradiction. As a former archbishop, he belonged to the church camp, but later on his identity as a member of the Priory of Zion was revealed, and thus became the sworn enemy of Holy Light religion. In line with the principle that the enemy of the enemy is a friend, in the final stage of the massacre Dragon City Guards never aimed at Rowan. Of course, this was also related to Luo Wan's good karma with the Dragon City Guards for decades. In the entire city, Luo Wan's reputation was very good. Even the Dragon City Guards were not willing to lay their hands on such an old man. However, for Rowan himself, it was difficult to accept this leniency because too many people died. As the regional archbishop, Rowan has always regarded the believers of Dragon City as his own children. But now these children have all become corpses. Did they do something wrong? No, because they never had a choice. When Faceless One's tyrannical power was monstrous, they could not be expected to resist directly. And when the war began, everyone was helpless. They did nothing wrong, yet they died a violent death. And could this be said to be the fault of the Dragon City Guards? Obviously not. Compared to the Holy Light believers, they were actually more innocent. The Holy Sword of Judgment fell from the sky, and then the Holy Light religion army surrounded the general barracks. From the beginning to the end, did the Dragon City Guards have a choice? Faceless One was naturally the main culprit, and he, as the Archbishop, failed to protect everyone, which was also a great dereliction of duty. What right did he have to continue living after such a dereliction of duty? In fact, Archbishop Rowan once thought of suicide. Although the doctrine of Holy Light religion strictly forbade this kind of behavior, in desperation he had no choice. However, a certain young man who claimed to be the spokesperson of the Saints found him and made him give up on the idea with just one sentence. Your life is no longer your own. If you feel guilty, then use your dying years to atone for your sins with practical actions. Death is just an escape. Only by living on bravely can one better face the dead. Luo Wan sighed and finally had nothing to say. In addition to Rowan, everyone needed to face the rest of their lives bravely. After a fierce battle, both sides could be said to be mutually wounded. Although Dragon City Guards won, their loss was not much better than that of Holy Light religion. Only half of the people survived, and many of them had lost their fighting ability forever. However, the entire Dragon City also suffered a huge loss. In the final stage of the war, countless buildings were destroyed. Many Holy Light believers took advantage of the danger to defend themselves, and the response of Dragon City Guards was to directly demolish the buildings along with the people. In the process, it was inevitable that civilians were injured. That night, Bedivere floated in the air, silently overlooking his city. Although today's Dragon City had not yet fallen into ruins, but the work of the last few decades seemed to have been done in vain. But in the end we won. Bedivere closed his eyes. This is a dreamlike victory. I never even thought about what to do next after this victory. Ah! A hearty laughter sounded beside Bedivere. The next step is, of course, to continue to win until Bretonnia is reunified and Holy Light religion is completely expelled. After half a day of calming himself down, Bedivere has developed a high immunity to such bold words. Not to mention that the person who spoke was not the monarch that he was determined to serve, but a mysterious 9 regions cultivator. Therefore Bedivere didn't show too much respect. It's easy to say, but Holy Light religion will not easily give up. The next battle may break out at any time and we only have a weary army. Looking around, we don't even have a single ally. This battle was indeed a miraculous victory, but the next situation was even more dangerous. The church has suffered a heavy loss that has never been seen in thousands of years, so how could they be willing to give up? Even if at this time they were in dire straits with the eastern city-states, they would certainly allocate their energy to deal with the rebellion in Dragon City. Compared to the ruins of Dragon City, which had almost no fighting power, Holy Light religion had much more abundant resources. After 100 years of operation, most of the forces in Bretonnia have a connection with Holy Light religion. As long as they promised enough benefits with the prestige and credibility of the #1 church in the continent, naturally, there would be people willing to be their pawn. Merely these jackals and wolves that might become the church's lackeys made Bedivere not dare to take them lightly. Moreover, Dragon City was too rich. Whether it was the equipment and ancient books for professions, or the gold and silver for ordinary people, Dragon City's accumulation was far beyond the reach of other cities. Now that both sides had suffered in the war, it was simply a naked temptation. Right now, if we are even a little bit careless, we will be attacked by a group, and we haven't even dealt with our own affairs. After a fierce battle, in addition to silently licking their wounds, Dragon City also had to face a critical problem: morale. In the previous day's fierce battle, Dragon City guards were basically united. Except for a few people who were coerced by Holy Light religion into defecting, most of them burst out with amazing cohesion. However, that was an instinctive response to seek self-preservation in a disaster. When the war was over and the crisis was lifted, the contradiction would inevitably be exposed. People could see the dangerous situation that Dragon City was facing. Right now, Dragon City guards could be said to have escaped from the jaws of death, but no one wanted to die again. Today's battle has repaid the favor of Dragon City for nurturing us. Next, do we need to continue to tie ourselves to Dragon City and wait for death? Yes, I just went out of the city to investigate, and there are already troops from other cities slowly gathering. Seriously, I don't think we can fight anymore. Such a voice quickly spread inside Dragon City, shaking the morale of the army. At the same time, for the ordinary people of Dragon City, this was also a restless night. Inside the city, the bloodstains had yet to disappear, and the murderous aura of Dragon City guards was still there. In the Cathedral of Holy Light religion, the light was dim. Outside the city, no one knew how many forces were eyeing them. Although the war was over, it could break out again at any time. The air inside the city was filled with a palpitating smell. And at this time, someone needed to come forward to stabilize the people's heart and suppress the situation. Aya stood on the square in the center of Dragon City. Under her feet, there was a tower that was pulled out of thin air by a spell, which allowed her to look down and have a panoramic view of the whole city. The bleak atmosphere inside Dragon City was also clear at a glance. In this regard, Aya just faintly opened her mouth, but her voice resounded inside and outside Dragon City. 150 years ago, it was also here that my father once led his own army to prepare for the final battle that was about to come. His opponent is the largest and last great lord of Bretonnia. The savage lord has done many evil deeds, and the people are boiling with resentment. However, he colluded with foreign races, his power is monstrous and his army is at its peak. But my father's army has just experienced 3 fierce battles, suffered heavy losses, and has become a weary army. The clear and piercingly cold voice was like the cold wind at night, which made people forget their troubles and focus their attention on the voice on the high platform, listening to the young girl's speech. At this time, people already knew the identity of the blonde girl, the daughter of the legendary Night King who died more than 100 years ago. Holding the stone sword, inheriting the will of the late king, the successor of Bretonnia's royal power. These dazzling titles could not really appease people's hearts. In the face of an imminent crisis, the gradually forgotten king seemed pale and powerless. After all, she was just a seemingly fragile little girl. Moreover, shortly after killing Faceless One, she fell into a deep sleep. Then the little girl finally woke up. Was she going to speak in front of everyone? Although this was not a good time to listen to the story, when Aya opened her mouth, the Dragon City guards could not help but be interested. For most of them, the Night King's 12 battles to unify Bretonia was just a sentence in the story, and the specific content was not clear to them. And in people's cognition, the invincible Night King naturally advanced triumphantly all the way, with no enemy under his command. However, at this time before the last battle, the Night King seemed to be in a desperate situation. In fact, the situation 150 years ago was indeed desperate. At that time, the Night King won 3 consecutive fierce battles to subdue Dragon City and led the army to rest in the city. At this time, the Savage Lord, who had always been entrenched in a corner of Bretonia, took advantage of the situation and proposed the condition of dividing the world equally. If the Night King did not agree, the Savage Lord's army would submerge Dragon City and eliminate the Night King. At that time, the number of available soldiers of the Night King was nearly 10 times that of the opponent. On the high platform, Aya was neither happy nor sad, narrating her own story from another perspective. That night his camp was also filled with all kinds of voices. The spies of the desolate overlord who had infiltrated the camp were spreading fear. The soldiers who had followed blindly were panicking and at a loss. The hearts of the veterans who had been through many battles were shaken. Dragon City, which had just surrendered, was watching coldly from the sidelines. Even the Knights of the Round Table began to argue endlessly. Illicit relations, retreat, temporarily avoid the sharp edge, as if there was a bottomless abyss in front of them that they could not advance even an inch. Hearing this, many people felt the same way and began to talk about it. Because if it was them, if they knew that the opponent had 10 times the number of troops, they would also hesitate and fear just like now. In the face of an evenly matched opponent, one bravely moved forward. That was courage. If it was 2 or 3 times, it would be suspected of being reckless. But if it was more than 10 times, it was simply seeking one's own death. So how did the Night King solve the problem at that time? 10 times the number of enemies. Could it be that he used some means to delay the time and recuperate before pressing forward with his army? Although people were also very clear that with the Night King's character, he would never easily compromise with the enemy, let alone the Savage Lord who believed in evil and killed countless people. But what else could he do if he did not compromise? If the situation at that time was really as bad as Aya said, there would be no chance of winning in a frontal battle. Unconsciously, people were deeply attracted by Aya's short story and began to be immersed in it. Perhaps this story was really too immersive. Looking at the countless pairs of vacant eyes under the high platform, Aya gently raised her head to hide her eyes filled with emotion. 150 years had passed, but everything seemed to have happened yesterday. The situation was exactly the same. After restraining the agitation in her heart, Aya slowly opened her mouth. Her voice carried a faint majesty that made people's hearts palpitate. Are we stray dogs? Or are we scavenging vultures? Are we the cockroaches lurking in the sewers? Or are we the stooped mice in the dark? No, we are the proud lions, the warriors blessed by the Breton dragon clan, the Bretonia knights that will always stand in the land of glory. Our principles are unity, courage, unbending, and unwavering uprightness. We will never negotiate with the demons, and will never bow to the Savage Lord. Because if we abandon our code, we will betray all the friends who bless us and protect us. We will betray the comrades who paved the road to victory with their lives in the past war. Because we have promised them and even promised ourselves that we will always face forward, bravely move forward, even if there is a bottomless abyss under our feet. But, my knights, do not be timid, do not despair, because under our feet is the glorious road to victory. We are the chosen masters of Bretonia. The brilliance of the Caliban guides us forward. The earth is our shield, the sky is our armor, and the wind, rain, and thunder are our weapons. Knights, cross the abyss, and ahead is the endless smooth road. In Dragon City, Aya's cry continued to reverberate. As time went by in the silence, it gradually turned into a low buzzing sound, stirring people's hearts. Even if the story has passed for 150 years, and today's Dragon City guards were not the faithful knights under the Night King, similar feelings continued to surge from the bottom of people's hearts. As the people of Bretonia, there would always be similar elements flowing in their blood. That was the thirst for glory. Once upon a time, the development of holy light religion in Bretonia was in full swing. A large number of foreign priests and holy knights poured in to abuse their power, yet they still received the forbearance of the people of Bretonia. After the Night King left, the people subconsciously wanted to find something to fill the void. However, it was not until this time that people found out that although holy light religion was more powerful, larger in scale, and also had its own light, but compared to the shining light of the Night King, it was nothing. The spirit of disregarding everything for the code in their heart was the glory that they truly yearned for. For this, they did not hesitate to die. Of course, 150 years later, even if people were not familiar with the history, they knew that the result of that battle was the victory of the Night King. The heroic sacrifice of the knights was not in vain, in exchange for an unprecedented high degree of unity in Bretonia. However, people were still impatient to hear Aya's story. In that battle my father took the lead. The Caliban crushed the 8 great witch doctors of the savage tribe and beheaded the savage lord. The morale of the Knights of the Round Table was like a rainbow as they broke through the enemy's formation with irresistible force. The battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The knights burned their life and soul to persist until the last moment, killing the enemy that was 10 times their number. 3 days later, the whole army cheered heartily to celebrate the victory. Under the high platform there were countless pairs of shining eyes. Standing on the high platform, Aya has clearly felt that the city seemed to be ignited with a raging flame. Therefore, she held up the Caliban, and a golden beam of light soared into the sky, illuminating the dragon city as if it was daytime. 150 years ago, my father used the Caliban to cut through the endless darkness and despair, establishing an unprecedented feat in Bretonia. Today the Caliban is still guiding us on the road to victory. At this moment I can clearly hear the cry of the Caliban. Victory is in front and will always be in front. The darkness around us is not our destination. The last bit of afterglow in the city is not our destination. Our destination is only to go all the way forward, cutting our way through the thistles and thorns, cutting our way to the light. Some people ask, what is in front? What are we going to fight for? The warriors of 150 years ago, even in the deepest and most desperate situation, still have a clear and firm belief. They believe in the spirit of chivalry, believe that Bretonia will definitely move toward unification and prosperity. And now, in the face of the fragmented country, in the face of the aggressive invasion of Holy Light religion, I want to say, this is the abyss that we have to cross. This is the powerful enemy that we are about to face. I am the daughter of the Night King, and my heart adheres to the same belief as the previous Night King. I firmly believe that this land is the land of Bretonia, the land of chivalry. Aya's voice was like a gale, like a tsunami. Her impassioned emotion swept through everyone's heart. In the name of the Caliban, I declare that the war for the restoration of Bretonia begins here. Anything that stands in the way of this road will be crushed. We will step on the ladder of victory to reach the shore of eternal glory. Long live Bretonia! Long live Bretonia! Chapter 322. Defeated? In the Holy City, a golden red-robed Holy One listened to the news reported by his subordinate in disbelief. Faceless One was defeated? The saint angrily slammed the armrest of the Saint White Stone throne, and a shockwave quickly spread out, causing the entire palace to tremble. In the face of the wrath of a legendary-level Holy One, his subordinate was drenched in cold sweat, but he insisted on reporting the complete news. Yes, everyone present saw that Faceless One was assassinated by a mysterious girl. The weapon she used is suspected to be Bretonia's divine weapon Sword in the Stone. Sword in the Stone? The Holy One was stunned and then somewhat bewildered. How could it be Sword in the Stone? That's clearly. Forget it, you go and report the news to the Prophet Holy One. Be sure to ask for his opinion. No need, I already know. While speaking, another golden red-robed Holy One walked into the hall. As his footsteps fell, the tremor of the hall also stabilized. Don't panic, the failure of Faceless One is not a bad thing for us. This new saint had the prophecy technique which was envied by everyone in the church. He could see into the future, and his position was the most respected among the 5 legendary saints. Seeing him coming, the master of the hall hurriedly got up and saluted. What advice does the prophet have? The Prophet Holy One said, the failure of Faceless One lies in the variable. When I sent him, I thought that the only opponent would be Bedivere. Even if Rowan and Marina rebelled, he could still suppress them. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden change in Dragon City. Whether it was the girl with the sword in the stone or the 9 regions people around her, they were all variables that I didn't foresee. However, the appearance of this variable made my dream even clearer, and I was finally able to confirm the identity of that black dragon. The black dragon in the Prophet Holy One's dream was the nightmare that had been hovering over Holy Light religion for hundreds of years. At this time, the Prophet Holy One said that the identity of the black dragon had been determined, which immediately made people ecstatic. It's already determined? It's the girl who assassinated Faceless One, the one who claimed to be the daughter of the Night King. It's her? Humph, that's just the right time to catch all of them in one fell swoop. This matter is of great importance, so why don't you and I take action personally? We can't give them any breathing room. The prophet said, that's exactly why I'm here. Apart from you and me, there's also. Before he could finish speaking, a servant suddenly ran in from outside the hall. He looked panicked and lost his composure. The hall master said angrily, "What is this?" The servant fell to his knees. "My apologies, Lord Saint. But I just received urgent news that the Eastern Front is in a state of emergency. A group of people from the knowledge capital of the 9 Regions Alliance, AGMA, and the Eastern City-States have come to the Holy City." What? For Holy Light Religion, the Eastern City-States Alliance has always been a thorn in their side. With the frequent exchange between the Eastern and Western continents, the development of the Eastern continent has become more and more rapid. Because of this, not long ago, they had deliberately used spies to create conflict between the two sides. Unexpectedly, the result was that the two sides had become united against a common enemy. The prophet saint was also greatly shocked. Among the 5 legendary saints, he firmly supported provoking the relationship between the 9 states and the Eastern City-States, because in the prophecy, there was no possibility of an alliance between the two. It was even more impossible for them to ally with the City of Knowledge, Agma, to attack the Holy City. Prophet? The hall master was stunned. The prophet closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. The Holy City is the foundation of the Church. The dragon of annihilation is still not strong enough. Let's put it aside for now and solve the immediate crisis. However, we can't completely let it go. I think we can call back the Holy Knights who guard the western checkpoint. Then we can mobilize the local forces in Bretonia to attack. With the remaining strength of Dragon City after the war, there is no possibility of escape. At that time, even if we can't destroy the Night King and the Sword in the Stone, we can destroy their foundation and make them become stray dogs so that they will no longer be a threat in the future. However, if the Sword in the Stone is the real deal, humph, the mistake of the Savage Lord 150 years ago? At that time, the Savage Lord was defeated and died with 10 times the number of troops, becoming a stepping stone for the Night King to reach the peak. We can send out 20 times the number of troops. Now, there are only 2,000 or 3,000 usable soldiers in Dragon City. If we transfer some of the knights from the western region, plus the surrounding forces, with a core of 100,000 professionals, it will be enough to crush Dragon City. No matter how sharp the Sword in the Stone is, can it kill all 100,000 people? Okay, I understand. In the western part of the continent, at the entrance to the Savage Land stood a heavily fortified fortress. The illustrious Bloodlust Holy Knights were stationed here. This huge legion of more than 30,000 professionals isolated all the creatures in the Savage Land from the continent. It could be said that they were the guardian of the western part of the continent. It was also because of this merit that Holy Light Religion was able to firmly stabilize its position as the #1 religion in the continent. Because the duty of guarding the border was too important, the Bloodlust Holy Knights were almost never mobilized. The Holy Knights have been here for generations, so they have been deeply rooted. With the Cold Wind Fortress as the core, they even gradually spread out into a small city. Many of the villagers who once lived nearby chose to rely on the protection of the Bloodlust Holy Knights. In exchange, they would also supplement the Bloodlust Holy Knights with daily necessities. At the same time, there were also some naturalized barbarian tribes who settled here, which the Bloodlust Holy Knights did not stop. In recent decades, the Bloodlust Holy Knights did not have many combat missions, and the life in the small cities around the fortress seemed comfortable. The training and actual combat of the core members of the Bloodlust Holy Knights were concentrated in the west of the fortress and the border, which ordinary people could not see. They only felt that the decades of overall peace seemed eternal. However, on this morning the sleeping people suddenly woke up. They felt that the earth was gently shaking and the sound of metal collision was continuous. Occasionally it was mixed with a thick roar of command. The peaceful small city was shrouded in a layer of chilling haze. No one who lived here was completely unfamiliar with the war. The familiar atmosphere suddenly woke them up. Is the war coming? In the middle of the small city was a spacious road, which was the road that the army of the Cold Wind Fortress used to travel inland. Although for decades the Bloodlust Holy Knights rarely used that road, usually no one dared to occupy that road, so they kept it unobstructed. However, at this time, people were surprised to see that the spacious road has been filled with dense crowds. The heavily armed Bloodlust Holy Knights neatly came out of the fortress and headed toward the eastern direction. At a glance, there were no less than 1,000 people. The follow-up troops were endless. For decades, It was not uncommon for Holy Light religion to mobilize the bloodlust Holy Knights on a small scale. However, they only mobilized dozens or hundreds of people at a time. This kind of large-scale movement of thousands of people had never happened before. What exactly happened in the eastern region? General, in one night we mobilized 20,000 troops and more than 5,000 professions. Isn't this action too hasty? In the middle of the army, two knights with particularly bright armor whispered to each other. One of them was the commander of this expeditionary force, one of the deputy heads of the Bloodlust Holy Knights. The other one was the deputy commander of this expedition. The Holy City has issued an urgent summon, requiring the knights to rush to Bretonia within 5 days at all costs and join forces with the local forces to besiege Dragon City. Therefore, even if it's hasty, there's nothing we can do. Local forces. A bunch of motley crew. It's already fortunate that they don't drag us down. I'm afraid we still have to make our move. Dragon City is a formidable enemy. Don't worry too much. Previously, Dragon City has experienced a holy war. More than half of the casualties are left, leaving only a group of defeated soldiers. Moreover, although those motley crew can't be controlled, they still have the numerical advantage. According to the information sent by the church can now mobilize nearly 100,000 professions. Although most of them are only low-level professions, when used correctly, they are still a force that can't be taken lightly. Unfortunately, the production of radiant archons can't keep up. Otherwise, if we use thousands of archons to control them and have them charge fearlessly, we won't even need to do anything. Don't think too much. When the time comes, we might have to rush to the forefront. However, if we're only facing a weary army, one attack should be able to destroy their front line. At that time, let those motley crew follow behind and wipe out the enemy. One battle can end the overall situation. However, 150 years ago, the Night King charged alone and beheaded the 8 great witch doctors and the savage overlord, leaving the enemy army without a leader. We must not repeat the same mistake. Rest assured, no one will be stupid enough to face the enemy head-on. The two commanders and deputy commanders talked while walking. During the march, they gradually outlined the next tactical framework. For the next war, they were full of confidence. Compared to the so-called Dragon City Guards who had been castrated by Holy Light religion for 100 years in Bretonia, these warriors in the western border who had been honed in countless actual combat could probably fight against 10 enemies. 5 days later, the Bloodlust Holy Knights crossed thousands of mountains and rivers at an incredible speed and appeared on the land of Bretonia. During the march, the Holy Knights could clearly feel the unusually oppressive atmosphere in the land of Bretonia, as if a storm was coming. The deputy commander of the Holy Knights pinched his nose and impatiently said, "There's a unique stench of lizards." Sure enough, in the face of disaster, the reaction of insects is the most sensitive. After this war, Bretonia must undergo a great purification, and I don't know how many people will die. The commander said, "It doesn't matter how many of these shallow heretics die. Holy Light religion has been here for more than 100 years, yet they haven't developed many devout believers, yet they still have to transfer people from other places to colonize. What a joke. I think this whole land has been polluted by heretical beliefs. Instead of developing believers here, it's better to turn it into a barren land just like the wilderness." Unfortunately, Bretonia is located in the hinterland of the continent, so large-scale purification is not realistic. However, as long as the last resistance force is eliminated, although this land is vast, it would still be at the mercy of others. The commander nodded. "That's right, the purpose of our trip is also this. Look, not far ahead is Dragon City. But why are there so many people outside the city?" The deputy commander of the Holy Knights, the deputy commander of the expeditionary force, was an advanced high-order profession with amazing eyesight. He could see the situation outside Dragon City from far away. This city that had just ended the Holy War was now tightly surrounded by hundreds of thousands of troops. Those troops came from hundreds of forces around Dragon City, each with different flags. Although the two sides did not fight each other, the atmosphere of the confrontation between the two armies was so oppressive that people could not breathe. The strength of the deputy commander was not much different, so he quickly saw the situation and could not help but laugh. These dogs are really diligent. In just 5 days, there are already so many people who responded to the call of Holy City to participate in the battle to destroy Dragon City. It seems like after 100 years, the influence of the Night King has completely disappeared. Of course it's impossible. If it weren't for the Night King haunting us, how could the faith of our Holy Light religion not be spread? It's just that, Anyone with a brain should know what would happen if they follow an inexplicable little girl and become the enemy of holy light religion. As for survival, it's a biological instinct. The deputy commander said with a smile, "General is right. These hundreds of thousands of troops that gathered were not elite troops full of fighting spirit. They were just a group of jackals and wild dogs. These hundreds of thousands of people besieged the city but did not dare to launch an attack. They had to wait for the arrival of the bloodlust holy knights." In the eyes of the Holy Knight commander, such a motley army was like mud under the soles of his shoes. However, even though he despised them in his heart after the war, these hundreds of thousands of people were still an indispensable help. In particular, among them, there were more than 100,000 people with professions. Although most of them were barely stuck on the edge of professions, with such a large number, if used properly they could play a miraculous effect. According to the news from Holy City, among these hundreds of thousands of people, there were 3 leading forces. They were the 3 largest cities around Dragon City, and also the 3 cities where Holy Light religion has the strongest penetration. Now that they have received the edict from Holy Light religion, the 3 city masters personally led the army to fight. Similarly, according to the news from Holy City, as long as the Holy Knights pacified and controlled these 3 forces, the remaining hundreds of thousands of people would naturally respond to the call. When the Bloodlust Holy Knights approached Dragon City, there were indeed 3 teams from the army outside the city, which went to meet the Holy Knights. The number of people in the team was not large, but their momentum was obviously better than the surrounding motley army. Obviously they were the personal guards of the city master. The commander and deputy commander of the Holy Knights looked at each other and helplessly smiled. Even if they looked down on them in their hearts, now that they wanted to borrow their strength, they had to give them face. Since the 3 city masters took the initiative to greet them, then the commander and deputy commander of the Holy Knights naturally had to come forward. For the sake of caution, the 2 of them took the most elite 50 people of the Holy Knights to leave the main force and stood on an open hilltop. The team of the 3 city masters took a detour and soon went up the hill. On the hilltop, the 2 commanders stood side by side on the left and right side. Their expressions were cold and solemn, which made them seem unusually difficult to get close to. As for the 3 city lords who came later, they all put on disgusting smiles. One of the city masters, whose status was obviously slightly higher than the other 2, was the first to open his mouth and say with a smile, "2 generals, we have been waiting for a long time." The city master was tall and sturdy, with a thick beard on his face and a mighty appearance. It was just that, the rigid smile on his face, which was obviously deliberately put on, made him look funny. To be able to see the 2 generals with my own eyes is really a blessing of 3 lifetimes. With that, he came forward and stretched out his arm, as if he wanted to shake hands with the Holy Knights. However, the commander of the Holy Knights was already extremely disgusted with these jackals and wild dogs. How could he be willing to shake hands with him? He laughed coldly as if he did not see the flattering gesture of the other party. Against wild dogs, why was there a need to give so much face? Being willing to come out alone to meet him was already a gift from the Holy Light. For creatures like these who had been contaminated by the mixed blood, just surviving was an original sin. However, in the next moment, the rigid and dull smiling face suddenly flashed with a sharp gaze. And in his outstretched right hand, there was even a sharp weapon that slowly turned transparent and revealed its shape. In the next moment, a golden light flashed before his eyes, and then the whole world fell into darkness. At the same time, the Holy Knights present were horrified to see their commander's head fly high up into the air, their eyes still filled with disbelief. Chapter 323. The Bloodlust Holy Knights were the most powerful force in Holy Light religion. They have been guarding the savage frontier all year round, fighting against the wild beasts and barbarians in the wilderness all day long, honing their rich combat experience and ice-cold mind. For the Bloodlust Holy Knights, the battlefield was like an amusement park. Immersed in it, there would be no fear, no hesitation, only the desire for victory at all costs. This was an incredibly powerful fighting will army. They could be besieged by several times the number of enemies and fight to the last soldier. They could endure under extremely harsh conditions until the opportunity to fight came. They could withstand any difficult test. However, at this moment, the Bloodlust Holy Knights fell into infinite shock and panic. Because right in front of them, the head of the commander of the expeditionary force flew high into the air. His eyes were wide open and he died with everlasting regret. Everything seemed so incredible. He was the deputy leader of the Bloodlust Holy Knights, a high-order profession. He once single-handedly destroyed a powerful tribe in the wilderness and tore tens of thousands of powerful barbarian warriors into minced meat. He also once beheaded a mountain-sized beast in the wilderness. He had a body of steel, so even a strand of his hair was indestructible. Because of this, he could stand out from the thousands of people and win the throne of the deputy leader of the Bloodlust Holy Knights. He was appointed as the commander of the expeditionary force, responsible for the crusade to decide the fate of Bretonnia. However, just a moment ago he was still proudly waiting for the wild dogs to lick his boots. The next moment, his head was separated from his body, and he died with everlasting regret. The one who beheaded him was the leader of the 3 city lords who came to surrender. A moment ago, that city lord had a smile on his face, bent down and reached out his hand. The next moment, a heavy sword appeared in his hand. His hand moved like lightning and he beheaded the head. It was so fast that no one could react. The head flew up, and the beheader's figure began to twist and change. The tall and sturdy warrior rapidly shrank, and the rock-like figure gradually turned into a gentle and charming woman. His thick beard and hair turned into soft and shiny golden hair, his pair of dark green eyes were without joy or sorrow, and the heavy sword in his hand flashed with dazzling light. No Bretonnia person would mistake that heavy sword, and anyone who had prepared for the Bretonnia campaign in advance would not mistake that cold face. The sword in the stone and its master, the new generation Night King Aya. Just as Aya resolutely beheaded the head, the 2 city lords next to her also made their move. One of them lifted the heavy cloak and hood with one hand, revealing a steel-like determined face. The other hand, like a spear, pierced the deputy commander's heart, and then the arm ignited with an inextinguishable flame, burning the corpse. The other city lord also changed his figure from a tall and sturdy man into a graceful girl. 12 rainbow lights flew out from the girl's sleeves and danced in the air, leaving trails of different colors. As they spun, they combined into gorgeous rainbow petals. In the blink of an eye, the elite holy knights on the hilltop were all killed by this deadly rainbow flower. These 2 people were the elite holy knights on peak. And these 2 were naturally beasts. The 2 were Saint Sword. Together with Aya, they pretended to be city lords who surrendered to the holy knights and lured out the commander and deputy commander of the holy knights. Then, with their full strength, they caught all the high-level people in one fell swoop. Together with Aya, they pretended to be the defecting city lord and lured the deputy commander of the Holy Knight Regiment out. Then, with their full strength, in the twinkling of an eye, these high-level holy knights were wiped out. Knights, charge with me. Outside Dragon City, hundreds of thousands of soldiers shouted in unison. Their voices shook the sky. Hundreds of thousands of people, like a tsunami, followed Aya's sword in the stone. In the face of the surging army, especially the Night King who took the lead with her shining sword in the stone, the bloodthirsty holy knights were like a group of dragons without a leader. Their hearts were at a loss. When their eyes came into contact with the light of the sword in the stone, the knights in the front subconsciously retreated. This was perhaps the first time in a long time that the bloodthirsty holy knights were so strongly shaken. What exactly happened? How could the situation suddenly become like this? Without much time to think, the knights in the front row have officially confronted the enemy. In front of them they held up their thick shields. The mysterious holy runes on the shields were as smooth as a mirror, and each shield was enough to withstand the impact of a furious giant elephant. And the rows of shields were connected like a moving wall, indestructible. Even though they were like a group of dragons without a leader, the holy knights still played their due strength. Unfortunately, in front of the endless waves, a brief flash was meaningless. Not to mention that in front of the waves, there was an invincible sword. Ha! Along with a thunderous roar, Aya swung the sword in the stone with all her strength. The sword light pointed, and a crack that was more than 10 meters wide and dozens of miles long burst open. Like the bloody mouth of a giant beast, it instantly swallowed hundreds of bloodthirsty holy knights. The defensive formation that the holy knights hastily laid out was also gone. Knights, charge! The waves came and the last reef was submerged in the darkness. Why did the rabble that gathered like wild dogs suddenly change sides and cooperate with Dragon City to fight against Holy Light Religion? This matter could be traced back to 5 days ago. Dragon City had just ended the cruel Holy War, and the Night King made her first public speech, which was inspiring. That night, under the dim light of the night, the noise of Dragon City shook the sky. Outside the city, countless pairs of bewildered eyes stared at the slightly trembling city. The vigorous eruption of energy in the city was like a substance, making it difficult for people to look straight at it. At this time, even though everyone knew that the guards in Dragon City were just a tired army, unable to fight again, but no one dared to face the soaring momentum. Aya's speech in the city spread far outside the city. Everyone knew that 150 years ago, there was a monstrous and powerful savage overlord who tried to go head-to-head with the Night King. As a result, he became a stepping stone for the Night King to unify the country. Compared to the desolate wild lord, what were they? They could barely be regarded as the savage lord's pawn. It was not easy to take advantage of the Night King's descendant. At this time, provoking the opponent was simply courting death. However, could they just sit back and relax? The daughter of the Night King wanted to restore Bretonnia and unify the whole country. As an independent force, they would inevitably be involved in this storm. However, in most people's hearts, they didn't have much rejection for this. Because compared to a fragmented and chaotic world, what was wrong with a unified country? At least, if the Night King was still in power, how could he allow Holy Light religion to abuse their power and exploit the people? Among the people present, there was no one who had not been oppressed by Holy Light religion. This organization, which loved to expand, implemented a colonial policy toward Bretonnia. They transferred the resources of other cities to Bretonnia, established their forces in the major cities, and then used various means to exclude the local rulers. Even Dragon City, an old and powerful city with the Knight of the Round Table, Bedivere, was suppressed by Holy Light religion to the point that it was difficult to breathe, not to mention the situation in other places. Unfortunately, since the disappearance of the Night King, no one has been able to lead the people to effectively resist Holy Light religion. The few who resisted were also annihilated at the first moment. Thus, people could only helplessly watch the country being torn apart and the people being oppressed by the Holy Light religion. Until this time, a ray of light appeared in front of people. Viscount Riddell, what do you think we should do next? Outside Dragon City, the chief magician of Blue Tile City asked. The great knight beside him helplessly shook his head. You ask me, but who should I ask? How could I, the son of the city lord, have the final say in such a big matter? The magician refused to let it go and asked, what do you think? The great knight was silent for a moment. Seeing that there was no one around, he felt a bit more at ease. Although the reputation of the magician in front of him was not very good, after getting along with him for half a day, he felt that the reputation might not necessarily be believed. Not to mention that Riddell City and Blue Tile City were far apart, and there was no conflict of interest between them, so there was no harm in speaking frankly. Personally speaking, I am a knight, and I believe in the knight's code. And the Night King, even though he has passed away, is still the lord that I serve in my heart. Can you understand that? The magician sighed. Don't forget, I used to be a knight, so why can't I understand your idea? In this land, it's not easy to find a knight who doesn't believe in the Night King. So when I saw the sword and the stone reappear in the world and heard that lady's speech, I actually wanted to immediately fly there and follow her. Unfortunately, I can't do as I please. The magician said with a smile, you're the son of the city master, so of course, you have more concerns than others. If it were me, I would have already run to pledge my allegiance. Unfortunately, I've become a magician and my reputation is not good, so I probably won't be welcomed by the new Night King, ha. The great knight naturally wouldn't take the magician's words seriously, but he still said, this new Night King's appearance is too sudden. In addition to her questionable identity, she, after all, lacks a foundation in Bretonnia. She wants to restore her country and expel Holy Light religion, so she must borrow all the power that she can borrow. A high-order profession like you would certainly be a guest of honor. The magician said, for an individual, it's not difficult to be a guest of honor, but what about a force? The great knight's annoyance was pointed out, so he coldly humphed. However, at this time, a hearty voice suddenly came from behind the two of them. Don't worry, we also have a special discount for group customers. Who is it? Oh. The great knight and the magician were startled. They have been watching the development of the battle outside Dragon City for a whole day. During this period, they deliberately chose a secluded corner to stay, so as to avoid being disturbed. Unexpectedly, they were unknowingly approached by a stranger from behind. The two of them turned around at the same time and activated all kinds of protective means. However, when they turned around, they saw a gentle smiling face without any hostility. Do you two know something about Dragon City? Chapter 324. Many things after the truth was revealed were actually very simple. The reason why Holy Light religion was attacked was because someone was one step ahead of them, who instigated all of Holy Light religion's lackeys to rebel. This was something that no one could have predicted. In the strategic layout of Holy Light religion, these miscellaneous troops, which they regarded as ants, actually played an important role, to share the damage and reduce the loss for the Bloodlust Holy Knights. The Bloodlust Holy Knights were the foundation of Holy Light religion, so the loss of one of them was heartache. In order to let the miscellaneous troops of Bretonnia keep up with the action and act as cannon fodder, Holy Light religion's action was quite fast. Early the next morning, they contacted the leaders of the several core forces and used various means to tie them to the church's chariot. Then they gradually spread to the periphery, and in just 3 days they contacted and gathered hundreds of thousands of troops. This high efficiency was rare even within the church. However, someone's action was much faster than the church's elites. That night he began to act. In his words, "In this turbulent time, we should dig people as early as possible." In fact, everyone understood this truth. The decision of the future of Bretonnia was largely those miscellaneous forces that occupied various regions. To win their support, one could even think with one's knee. However, no matter how fast the church's action was, it was, after all, an organizational action. The specific implementation had to go through a series of procedures. However, as long as Wang Lu thought about it, who could restrain him? The degree of freedom of action was completely not on the same level. Of course, just seizing the initiative was not enough. Compared to the #1 church in the continent, Aya and Dragon City, no matter how one looked at it, were somewhat unstable and not worth relying on. Empty words, why should people accompany you to take the risk? For this problem, even Aya didn't have a mature plan. What she could do was to show her enthusiasm, hoping to arouse the resonance in the blood of the people of Bretonnia. To a certain extent she did a good job. After listening to Aya's speech, almost everyone's heart palpitated for a moment. However, this was, of course, not enough. To be the leader of a force, they couldn't be emotional. They were best at balancing the advantages and disadvantages of the situation. However, for Wang Lu, the solution to this problem was too simple. Isn't the key to poaching people from the opponent the premium? No one would not be tempted by the offer from Holy Light religion. Take Wang Lu's first poaching as an example. After Wang Lu's frank appearance, it immediately aroused the other party's vigilance, because his smiling face was not unfamiliar to anyone. In the fight during the day, Wang Lu single-handedly blocked Faceless One and successfully forced him to retreat, showing his unfathomable strength. Most importantly, after Faceless One was killed, Wang Lu soared into the sky, and under the watchful eyes of millions of people, he reached out and hugged Aya, showing an extremely intimate relationship. "Don't be nervous, I have no ill intentions towards you too." Wang Lu shrugged and said, "In fact, I'm here as a lobbyist." "Lobbyist?" "To persuade you to join the new Night King. Just now, Her Majesty Night King spoke so loudly that you must have heard it. She wants to rebuild the country and restore the unity. However, right now there are still many things to be done, and the opponent is a behemoth like Holy Light religion. Therefore we urgently need all forces to join us. For this reason we have offered very favorable conditions. It can be said that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Hearing Wang Lu's straightforward statement, the Great Knight and the magician looked at each other. They didn't hurry to inquire about the other party's conditions but instead asked, "Who are you exactly? The identity is uncertain, what's the use of your extravagant bragging?" Wang Lu said, "Me? You can think of me as the Night King's agent. Unless she explicitly objects, my words have the same effect as hers." "Same effect?" The two were surprised. What exactly is this guy's background? With the Night King's pride, how could she easily let others speak for her? Wang Lu smiled and said, "Because we're a family, why should there be a difference?" "A family?" The Great Knight and the magician's eyes widened. Just now, the majestic new Night King actually. However, considering what they saw with their own eyes, the intimacy between Wang Lu and Aya, these words did have some weight. Seeing that they were somewhat in disbelief, Wang Lu took out a few crystal-clear chips. 9 regions specialty crystal recording can record images. The key point is that the recorded content can't be fabricated or tampered with. You guys are knowledgeable so you should know about this. Both of them nodded. Then Wang Lu extracted the image from the chip. Suddenly the two of them were shocked and staggered back. In the chip, Aya was wearing a plain dress and cooking hard in front of a stove. Also, she was lying on the dining table taking a nap, looking at ease, seemingly defenseless against her surroundings. The last one, which was also the most powerful one, was Aya carefully feeding chicken soup to Wang Lu with a spoon, looking very affectionate. Naturally, they couldn't guess that these were the props that Wang Lu deliberately took on the Spirit Sword Mountain in case he needed them in the future. The last one was actually Wang Lu cooperating with Aya to develop a new dish. However, for those who didn't know the inside story, the deterrent was unparalleled. Seeing the two stunned, Wang Lu smiled and said, "The life of the new Night King, is that enough to explain the problem? Very well, let's believe your identity. So, what does the Night King want us to do?" The Great Knight asked seriously, "Pledge allegiance and surrender? Pledge allegiance and surrender? The Night King has never pursued those things. Don't forget, the Knights of the Round Table, which symbolizes equality and freedom, is the invention of the Night King." Wang Lu shook his head. What the Night King wants is a unified and powerful Bretonia, not a high and mighty throne that suppresses the entire land. What she needs is an alliance of all forces to join, to get along with each other equally and to fight against the foreign enemy. An alliance of equals, where there is no distinction between superior and inferior? Wang Lu said, "It's similar to the eastern city-states. The alliance forces form a council to command the overall situation. The forces send representatives as members to discuss and decide major strategic decisions. Each city has a high degree of autonomy. There is no absolute ruler in the alliance, and the interests of all parties will be fully respected. For you, this should be an extremely generous condition, right?" "Of course." The magician's voice trembled slightly. "But why? Why ask when you already know the answer? Of course, it's because your value is now at its highest." Wang Lu was very calm. "Whether it's the Night King or the Holy Light religion, they all need to win your support. For this reason, the Night King is willing to show her generosity. Of course, don't think that we lack confidence. Don't forget, the Night King has the sword in the stone, the proof of the King of Bretonia, and also the invincible blessed weapon. More than 100 years ago, the Night King, with the sword in the stone, created a miracle. I don't think I need to repeat it. Compared to the difficulties that the previous king once encountered, the current situation is actually nothing." That's true?" Seeing that the two of them were somewhat moved, Wang Lu immediately said, "By the way, the Night King has reached an agreement with the 9 Regions Wanxian League. You should know about what happened in the East recently." 9 Regions Wanxian League? That's not surprising. The exchanges between the East and the West continent are getting more and more frequent, so the Wanxian League also needs to win allies in this continent. In fact, as the representative of the Wanxian League, I was sent to the Night King to help her rebuild her motherland. So that's how it is. In addition, we have the support of the Meteorite Mercenary Corps, Wild Goose Falling City, Silverstone Fortress and other forces. Coupled with the available soldiers of Dragon City Guards, our forces have begun to take shape. Is that true? The Great Knight's eyes shone and his voice trembled. It was not until this time that he really felt shocked. The Meteorite Mercenary Corps, Wild Goose Falling City, and Silverstone Fortress were all first-class forces in Bretonia. But now, they have actually joined the Dragon City Alliance? If you don't believe me, you can ask them. In short, it's the same sentence, this opportunity doesn't come again. After a moment of silence, the Great Knight's eyes lit up and he said in a sinking voice, "If Her Majesty the Night King really thinks so, then I can promise on behalf of Riddle City that we are willing to join the alliance. I hope we can work together to build a beautiful and powerful country." After a long time, the magician also nodded. "Then I will also overstep a bit and make a promise on behalf of Blue Tile City. After seeing your sincerity, we will not let Her Majesty the Night King down." Wang Lu said with a smile, "Very well, the specific matter, please immediately report back to the city master. By the way, Holy Light Religion still doesn't know that we have developed an alliance, so when the time comes, I hope that you will cooperate with us." A moment later, in another camp on the outskirts of Dragon City, the tent of the Meteorite Mercenary Corps' leader welcomed an uninvited guest. "Sir Leader, do you want to know about Dragon City?" "Yes, Riddle City and Blue Tile City have joined the alliance. Now we are waiting for you." At present, Holy Light Religion still doesn't know about this, so later, we will need your cooperation." A moment later, the leader of the Silverstone Fortress, General Vaca, also heard similar words. "Sir General, do you want to know about Dragon City?" "Yes, the Meteorite Mercenary Corps, Riddle City, and Blue Tile City have joined the alliance. Now we are waiting for you." "Yes, we will need your cooperation. Holy Light Religion still doesn't know about our conversation." On the same night, similar scenes happened many times. Wang Lu spared no effort and talked all night with more than 50 forces outside the city. With generous conditions, he won over a large number of independent forces to join the alliance. 5 days later, the Bloodlust Holy Knight Regiment smugly appeared outside Dragon City. They didn't know that the wild dogs that surrendered had become hungry wolves with hidden claws. And they themselves would be buried in the wolf's belly. Chapter 325. It's really not a happy celebration banquet? In the Dragon City Master's mansion, Aya picked up a glass of wine, but she didn't have the slightest interest in drinking. In front of the wine table there was a burst of laughter. The high-order professions of Dragon City guards, the leaders of the forces around Dragon City and their personal guards. More than 200 people gathered in the lobby of the Dragon City Master's mansion. This mansion belonged to Bedivere, which was located in one of the most prosperous areas of the city. However, Bedivere preferred to live in the barracks, so the Dragon City Master's mansion was rarely used. However, now, in the deserted mansion, people were toasting each other, talking and laughing. This was a celebration banquet to celebrate the glorious victory that had just ended. The invincible bloodlust Holy Knights of Holy Light religion suffered a devastating blow at the gate of Dragon City. More than 30,000 people of the bloodlust Holy Knights were completely wiped out. The commander and deputy commander died on the spot, and none of the high-order professions were spared. Only a few lucky small fries managed to escape, but they were already insignificant. This was perhaps the heaviest loss that the bloodlust Holy Knights suffered since their establishment. Especially since even the deputy commander died here, it was absolutely a devastating loss. On the other side, after this victory, the reputation of Aya and Dragon City guards was like the sun in the sky. The entire Bretonia trembled. The Caliban in Aya's hand shone with dazzling light, as if the restoration of royal power. At this time, there seemed to be no reason to feel unhappy. However, whenever she saw the various leaders of the various forces in the lobby, Aya felt deeply helpless. This was a glorious victory, but also a victory that was completely out of her control. Although the fierce battle under the city wall had solved the immediate enemy, it had buried a deeper hidden danger. In order to integrate the coalition forces, Wang Lu, in an almost crazy manner, persuaded more than 40 city masters, generals and regimental commanders to form a giant alliance. However, as the price on behalf of Aya, he made an incredibly generous promise. A federal country without royal power that was jointly governed by all forces? That morning, when Wang Lu reported the results of his work to Aya with a tired body, the angry Aya subconsciously wanted to chop him with her sword. Since her death from serious injury more than 100 years ago, she did not hesitate to transform into a spirit of the brave departed. With her obsession, she crossed the 9 regions and after many hardships returned to her homeland. Wasn't it just to rebuild the country and restore the former glory of Bretonia? But all of this was completely destroyed by Wang Lu overnight. Without the Night King, could Bretonia still be called Bretonia? How could a country without a supreme leader be called a country? What was the difference between a loosely structured federation and a divided regime fighting for itself? Then what was the point of her all of them painstakingly doing? In this regard, Wang Lu did not argue too much. Trust me. Trust you? Believe that I won't harm you. Believe that I will always be invincible. But Aya was about to say something, but Wang Lu gently pressed her lips. Trust me. Aya was silent for a long time. Finally, she did not say another word. Her dark green eyes were gradually filled with determination and trust. Yes, I believe in you. I bet my motherland to believe in you. And the result of that moment of trust was the helplessness at the celebration banquet. The celebratory atmosphere around her could not arouse her sympathy, because Aya knew that after tonight's banquet was over, Dragon City would become the arena of power for the dignitaries in the entire Bretonia. Just imagining that scene was enough to give people a headache. Wang Lu, I can really believe in you, right? Closing her eyes, Aya drank the wine in her cup in one gulp and excluded all the noise around her ears from her mind. Tonight was the night of victory, so for the time being, she did not want to think about so many annoying things. It was just that, why did she always feel that she had forgotten something important? At the same time in Dragon City, although there were traces of war everywhere, the festive atmosphere was still overflowing. Most of the shops in the commercial street had reopened, heartily welcoming the hundreds of thousands of troops who returned triumphantly. Lu Li happily and jubilantly walked on the street that had just been cleaned. Her hands were full of barbecue skewers, and the aroma of the meat was overwhelming. Of course, no matter how slender her fingers were, the number of skewers that she could hold was limited. Therefore, she didn't hesitate to use her flying sword magical power to float hundreds of skewers in midair like flying swords. When she was happy, she would randomly pick one and take a bite. Dragon City's food and beverage industry in Bretonia could be considered as an anomaly. It brought together gourmets from all over the Western continent, who, with their unique craftsmanship from their hometown, rescued Dragon City from the despair of food. Of course, the price had always been high. However, today was the night of victory, and Lu Li, as a great contributor to the victory, almost everywhere she went was free. Not to mention that Wang Lu had deliberately stuffed her full of money and told her that she must eat until she was satisfied. Lu Li felt that her several months of hard work in the Western continent had, at this moment, gotten the biggest reward. However, after eating barbecue for a long time, her mouth was somewhat greasy. Therefore, Lu Li wanted to fly to the air to find a cold drink shop. "The cold drink is on the left corner of the alley." A gentle voice came into her ear. Lu Li looked over and sure enough, she saw a clear cold drink in an inconspicuous small shop. "Thank you." Lu Li swallowed a large piece of fat and was ready to buy the cold drink. However, when she turned around, she found out that the person who kindly reminded her was holding a cup of emerald-colored drink and handing it to her. That person seemed to be about 35 or 36 years old, dressed in a magician's robe, looking elegant and friendly. "It's my treat." Lu Li firmly shook her head. "Senior brother said, I can't eat food from strangers." The magician said with a smile, "If you buy food from the shop, do you know the shop owner?" Lu Li was immediately stunned. "Yes." Then she reluctantly let go of her hand and let the skewers float around her. However, she didn't dare to take another bite. "You don't have to be so dogmatic. Moreover, we've actually met before." The magician laughed in spite of himself and then said, "In the previous battle, you saved my life. At that time in the melee, I was approached by a dark holy knight. Seeing that I was at my wit's end, you used a flying sword to kill him and I was thus saved. Therefore just now I wanted to thank you for your life-saving grace. However, you probably don't remember a small fry like me, right?" Who knew that Lu Li seriously said, "I remember at that time, you were casting the thundercloud spell." The magician was pleasantly surprised. "You actually remember?" My memory has always been very good." Lu Li was very happy. "In that case, we're not strangers anymore," the magician said and then handed the drink in his hand forward. "It's my treat." Lu Li thought for a moment. "Indeed, if we're not strangers, then there should be no problem." Then she took the drink and drank half of it in one gulp. "By the way, what's your name?" "I'm just a nobody," the magician said, looked around and then changed the topic. "Is your senior brother not here?" Lu Li didn't care whether the other party introduced himself or not. She just said, "Senior brother is busy with important things in the city master's mansion." The magician shook his head. "Celebration night? What could be more important than accompanying the hero? You're one of the biggest contributors to the victory of the war. How could he leave you alone?" Lu Li somewhat didn't understand. "I don't know. Senior brother always has his reasons for doing things." "Alas, your senior brother doesn't care about you at all." "Of course not, senior brother has always been very good to me." Lu Li sweetly smiled. "Accompany me to practice swordsmanship, cook for me, feed me snacks and almost never scold me loudly." "Is that so?" The magician was a bit surprised. He looked at Lu Li seriously and said, "Do you like your senior brother?" Lu Li frankly replied, "Very much." "Haha, few people in 9 regions are as straightforward as you. But, since you like him, why don't you strive for him?" Lu Li curiously asked, "Strive for what?" "If you like a person, you should strive for the other party's love." Lu Li explained, "But senior brother already likes me very much. Although he didn't say it, I can feel it." The magician said, "If he likes you, how could he let you stay here alone while he accompanied the Night King to drink and have fun? Obviously he likes the Night King more than you." Lu Li gawked for a moment. "Yes. Aren't you going to do something?" "Do something?" Lu Li was puzzled. "What?" "Because only if you do more and better, senior brother will like you more and dote on you more. Don't you want that?" Lu Li somewhat hesitated. "But I don't know how to do it. Previously, senior brother always told me to do it." "That's why senior brother doesn't like you the most. You have to learn to take the initiative." The magician earnestly said, "If you wait for senior brother to tell you to do everything, his liking for you will be limited." Lu Li somewhat helplessly said, "But I don't know what to do. With the degree of intimacy between the two of you, a small fight won't have any effect. If you want to do it, you have to do it big." The magician said, "Since ancient times, nothing can move people's hearts and make them remember for a lifetime than the word sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" Lu Li tilted her head and listened carefully. "For example, if both of you are poisoned and there is only one antidote, then," Lu Li said with a smile, "of course it's me who will eat it." Senior brother's non-phase method is immune to all poisons, nothing will happen to him. The magician was silent for a long time and then said, then if we encounter a strong enemy, senior brother will carry it in front of us. Wrong. The magician hated iron for not becoming steel. Do you think your senior brother's defense is powerful and omnipotent? In this world there will always be enemies that he can't beat, there will always be heavy pressure that he can't bear. When the time comes, do you still want him to carry it in front of you? Do you still want to safely hide behind your senior brother and let him bleed and sacrifice for you? Then what should I do? The magician coldly said, when it's necessary, you should be the one to carry it in front of him and sacrifice yourself to fight for the chance to survive for senior brother. Sacrifice myself? Luli was somewhat confused but also somewhat enlightened. Her expression gradually turned blank. If you really like senior brother, you should have the awareness to sacrifice yourself for him. The magician said, only in that way can you be qualified to be senior brother's favorite woman. Is that so? Luli asked in a perplexed manner, but, senior brother rarely let us fall into such a dangerous situation. If there's difficulty you have to go. If there's no difficulty, then create the difficulty you have to go. The magician lightly said, there are so many powerful enemies on the continent, do you want your senior brother to provoke them? Since your purpose is to sacrifice yourself, then you should take the initiative to create such an opportunity. Luli was confused. Sorry, I don't quite understand. I'd better ask senior brother. Wait a minute. The magician stopped her. This kind of thing, if you and senior brother discussed it in advance, how could there be a surprise? The reason why he doesn't like you the most is because you rely on him for everything like a child who can't grow up. Upon hearing this, Luli was a bit sad. Very well, I won't say it. About today's matter, you go back and think about it. But, there's no need to tell your senior brother about the matter of meeting me. Trivial things are not worth mentioning. Your senior brother has a lot of things to do. If you bother him with these things, even if he doesn't say it, his heart will hate you. Luli let out an ode sound, but she has already bowed her head, no longer in the mood to say anything. The magician smiled. Well, today I can talk so much with my savior, even if I die, I have no regrets. So, goodbye, Luli. With that, he turned around and left, no longer bothering Luli. His figure soon disappeared in the vast sea of people. Completely disappeared as if he had never existed. Chapter 326. After the end of the banquet that lasted until early in the morning, Aya groggily returned to her bedroom, which was actually the bedroom of the city master's mansion. She had the body of the brave departed, and as one of the most powerful knight profession in the continent, her physique was so powerful that it was even superior to that of the wild beasts. Naturally, her alcohol tolerance was also bottomless. But she was still drunk. At the banquet, Bedivere unexpectedly took out the secret wine of the dragon clan. 1 cup was diluted into 1 barrel, which made all the heroes in the hall fall to the ground. Aya drank the rest of the barrel by herself and suddenly felt dizzy. When she opened her eyes, she found that the luxurious ceiling of the city master's mansion was no longer in front of her, but an endless deep darkness. Good morning, Aya. Wang Lu's gentle greeting at this time sounded faintly dull. Where is this? Aya shook her dizzy head and then struggled to prop herself up, trying to observe the situation around her. However, her hands softened and she almost fell back down. Wang Lu reached out his hand to pull Aya up and then shook his head. Alas, look at you, you're a complete mess. Not only are you delirious, even your hair is messed up. Let me help you pull out this strand of hair. Aya peevishly swatted away Wang Lu's hand, and then her eyes swept around. Her somewhat blurred eyes suddenly turned sharp. Is this the king's treasure house? Wang Lu said, finally, you haven't forgotten. Although we've won against Holy Light Religion, we're not free yet. The main task has not been completed, it's just that our side task is a bit too far. Aya was silent for a moment. What about the others? Are they all here? Of course. The price for the group transmission is very high, how could we not gather all of them? Aya narrowed her eyes and sure enough, in the darkness, she saw the figures of Lu Li, Bai Shixian and Quan Zhouhua. What the hell is going on? Wang Lu said, 999 blood roses have been collected. After the 2 wars, we've collected more than 1,500 bodies of middle-order professions of Holy Light Religion. Aya said, I know, but I remember Golden King once said that after we return to Taba City, we can only enter the treasure house through any entrance. So, I never thought I would come back here so soon. While speaking, Aya's eyes gradually became sharp. Wang Lu, I'm willing to believe you, but please give me an explanation. What? It could be said that the timing for Wang Lu to pull Aya back to the treasure house was indeed inappropriate. Because after experiencing the war that determined the future of Bretonia, Aya wanted to take this opportunity to comprehensively strengthen her authority, as much as possible to make up for the side effect of Wang Lu's previous headhunting at a premium price. Although Wang Lu's promise was not Aya's original intention, Aya would not blatantly break the promise. In her opinion, even in a federal country she could still have authority over anyone as long as she operated properly during this period of time. Unfortunately, in this best period of time, she was caught by Wang Lu in the treasure house and missed the opportunity. And with Aya's understanding of Wang Lu, it was hard to imagine that he was careless. The reason? Seeing that Aya seriously asked, or rather questioned, Wang Lu could only earnestly reply, I really don't want you to repeat the same mistake, that's all. Repeat the same mistake? Haven't you learned your lesson from the failure of more than 100 years ago? Aya sighed. That's not the same. Yes, at that time your situation was actually better than now. Holy Light religion didn't regard you as a thorn in their side, and Bretonia wasn't castrated by Holy Light religion for more than 100 years. At that time your strength was at its peak. But you failed. Your loyal Knights of the Round Table were torn apart, your trusted subjects left you, and the knights who were once like brothers turned their swords against each other, blood flowed like a river. And now the situation is even more difficult than that time. What's wrong with me worrying that you will repeat the same mistake? Your worry is unnecessary, I will not make the same mistake. Aya said, besides, would taking me away from Dragon City improve the situation? A group of dragons without a leader will only become more chaotic. You don't have to worry about Dragon City. I left behind a sufficient backup plan before I came here. Moreover, for the current situation, if we make progress in the king's treasure house as soon as possible, we can take drastic measures against Holy Light religion, which can better contain them, making them have no time to take care of Bretonia. At least we have the bargaining chip. Aya calmly thought for a moment and then accepted Wang Lu's explanation. Right now, the king's treasure house was the most important strategic location of Holy Light religion, and its status was much higher than that of Bretonia. Once there was instability here, Holy Light religion would not hesitate to calm the situation, which could indeed play a containment effect. However, she still couldn't let go of the previous question. What did he mean by repeating the same mistake? Wang Lu said, as for your so-called won't make a mistake, you haven't even realized where exactly did you go wrong, so how can you have the confidence to say that you won't make a mistake? Of course I know. Aya's voice gradually rose. For the past 100 years, I have been reflecting on myself all the time. I am very clear that as a king I still have too many shortcomings. Therefore this time I will be more cautious and more humble to lead my people to victory. I will absolutely not fail again. Ridiculous. Wang Lu was unprecedentedly mean. Let me put it this way, based on your current awareness, you will definitely fail again. Because you don't understand what qualities a real leader should have. Do you think that by piling up your personal attributes to infinitely high, you can be a qualified king? That's a joke. Speaking to this, seeing Aya's angry face, Wang Lu explained, apart from the difference in ability just in terms of personal charisma between you and me, who do you think is more suitable to be a king? Aya frowned, seemingly finding it difficult to understand. How could you ask such a stupid question? Aya, you feel too good about yourself. In fact, it's your so-called personal charisma that determines that you are doomed to not be a qualified king because... Shut up, bastard, you're too noisy. Just as Wang Lu was ready to seriously popularize Aya's success theory, Golden King's voice faintly sounded from the vast darkness. Golden King? Aya promptly put down the topic and began to take the master of the treasure house seriously. It's you? Of course it's him. Otherwise, how could we cross thousands of mountains and rivers in one night to come to the treasure house of Taba City? Now that Holy Light religion and the eastern city-states are engaged in a fierce battle, the city has been under high martial law, so normal methods can't get through. However, we have a back door specially opened by the master of the treasure house. Wang Lu promptly explained, 999 human blood roses can perfectly pass the 5th level and get the highest reward of this level. But if you collect more, you can also get another reward. Being able to teleport us from tens of thousands of miles away to here is the content of the additional reward. Golden King coldly snorted. In just a few months, you can actually collect 1,500 human blood roses. You bastards are unexpectedly capable. Golden King, in his usual sarcastic tone, gave a rare relatively positive evaluation. However, the real challenge begins now, so there's no time to listen to you discuss the ridiculous way of the king. A group of lowly bastards don't need to expect to reach the realm of the king. Just do what you should do, bastards, don't let me down. With that, Golden King's voice gradually faded away. Obviously, he could not appear in front of them for a long time. Well, time is limited, so I'll simply talk about the current situation. After Golden King left, Wang Lu clapped his hands to attract the attention of the others. Thanks to the back door opened by Golden King, we have completed the other party's difficult conditions and have the qualification to pass the 5th level. But as long as we are still deliberately targeted by the administrator, it's only a matter of time before we are trapped to death. Golden King can't possibly open the back door for us every time, so from now on we have to fight back. We can't passively wait for the other party to make their move. What do you want to do? I asked. It's very simple, we'll start with the reward. According to the principle of equivalent exchange, if the other party sets an impossible condition, we must prepare an impossible reward. With that, Wang Lu raised his right hand, and a gorgeous rain of flowers scattered all over the sky. Administrator. 999 roses have been collected. Now it's time for you to redeem your reward. With a roar, Wang Lu broke the illusion that he had previously set up here. Fortunately, the illusion could only be seen from the outside, otherwise if Aya saw it, she would definitely cause trouble. Shortly after the illusion was broken, the administrator's voice rang in the depths of the endless darkness. It's you? How is that possible? The always calm voice could not help but reveal a bit of shock. A moment later, a vague face composed of black mist slowly emerged. So it's you? After a close observation, the administrator finally recognized the identity of Wang Lu and his team. The ones who stirred up trouble in Bretonia are actually you. How did you leave the king's treasure house? Even if you have a space-type prop, to get out of the shackles of this artifact space. Could it be that the soul of the dead is helping you? After all, the administrator had been in control of the treasure house for 80 years and was very familiar with the treasure house. Thus he quickly speculated the truth. However, after knowing the truth, he fell into great fear. If it was that haunting shadow, then... No, calm down first, things might not be that bad. The administrator calmed down and lightly said, You just said you want to redeem the reward? That's fine. Congratulations, according to the rules of the treasure house, even if it's a divine tool, I can give it to you. Don't you 9 regions people come here to find divine tools? Wang Lu sneered and interrupted. Have you ever heard of a fable from 9 regions? A farmer met an immortal. The immortal had the golden touch technique. With a touch of his finger, he could turn stone into gold. The immortal asked the farmer what he wanted. The farmer didn't want a mountain of gold and silver, nor did he want immortality. He just wanted his finger that could turn stone into gold. In the same way, I don't need your rare treasures, divine tools, or immortal pets. I just want a fair competition qualification. I want to compete with you for the position of administrator. The administrator was greatly shocked and roared, What a joke! In your dreams. Greedy yellow-skinned bastards, you can't get anything. Really? Wang Lu said with a smile, If you have the ability, then show me. Let us get nothing and get out of the treasure house with our tails between our legs. But can you do it? I have collected all 999 human blood roses. If you have the ability, then trample on the rules of the treasure house and swallow the reward in front of me. Can you do it? Show me. The administrator was silent. As Wang Lu said, he really couldn't do it. He couldn't even extract the divine tool from the treasure house to reward Wang Lu. He was the administrator, but he didn't have full access to the treasure house. When it came to divine tools, he was powerless. Therefore, at this time he was in a difficult position. Can't do it? Then, according to the rules, when you give the task but can't fulfill the reward, what is it? It's malfeasance. As the administrator of the Golden King, it's difficult for you to even perform the basic duties. What face do you have to steal the position of administrator? If you don't step down now, when will you? Enough. The administrator roared, You want a fair competition? Fine, I'll compete for you. While speaking, the dark space was lit up by a ray of light. The flower rain that Wang Lu sprinkled before was guided by this light, forming a bright road that went straight forward without an end. This is the road to the administrator. If you have the guts, come here. Chapter 327. Along the shining road that runs through the 5th floor, after no one knows how long, the space in front of them changed, and an unusually magnificent white-gray stone gate appeared in front of them. Aya asked in surprise, "What is this place?" Wang Lu was also stunned for a moment. He looked around and saw a group of people standing on a floating island. Behind them was the endless sea of clouds, and in front of them was the stone gate. In short, it's not the 6th floor of the king's treasure house. Unfortunately, the person who knows the situation the most doesn't come forward to explain, so everything can only be based on pure speculation. As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, the stone gate in front of them suddenly buzzed and vibrated. Its rough surface twisted like water ripples, vaguely showing a human face, and then issued a dull, heart-shaking voice. "No need to guess, this is the Golden King's Championship trial." Golden King's Championship trial? It should be the written interview for the administrator position. Wang Lu frowned. "Are you the person in charge?" "Person in charge? No, there's no one in charge here." The stone gate spoke with a rumbling voice, its expression and tone revealing a bit of sadness. "I'm just an ordinary stone gate. How much do you know about the championship trial?" "This is a road that only extraordinary brave people can embark on." Wang Lu nodded. "That is, only by achieving a score that far exceeds the standard value in a certain floor of the king's treasure house can they have the opportunity to enter the championship trial, which is a random hidden instance. This road of trial is very long, but the further you go, the more you will get. The last person who opened the road of trial stopped at the 5th level and got the favor of the king." "The favor of the king?" "Golden King is really blind to lead the wolf into the house. But in other words, as long as I can reach the 6th level, Holy Light Religion can say goodbye to the king's treasure house. There's no one in charge of this road of trial. Only the stone gates that guard each level are still silently waiting. If you meet their conditions, you can enter the next level. However, I haven't been in contact with the last few stone gates for a long time, so I don't know if there are any new changes." "So that's how it is." Wang Lu pondered for a moment and did not continue to ask. Instead, he went straight to the point. "As the guardian of the 1st level, what do you want?" The stone gate replied, "A long, long time ago, I accidentally lost one of the king's treasures. As a result, I was punished by the king and became the guardian of this place until today. If you can help me find that treasure, I will be very grateful to you." When Wang Lu heard this, he didn't immediately ask about the treasure. Instead, he asked curiously, "What about the last challenger? What mission did you give him?" "It's the same mission as yours. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to find the treasure." The stone door said, "However, he found some important clues. Then, as a compromise, I can allow him to pass this stage if he pays a sufficient price." Wang Lu said, "Then, is it convenient for you to tell me those clues?" The stone gate replied, "Unfortunately, I can't do that. Moreover, if you submit a clue that he has already submitted, it will be invalid." "Understood." Wang Lu nodded and understood. "In other words, when it's my turn, I can only pass if I find the treasure itself? Alright, then tell me, what exactly is that treasure?" The stone gate's voice was full of vicissitudes. "That is a wine cup that the king likes very much. Although it's made of ordinary materials, only high-quality gold of blessing, it was personally made by the most famous jewelry grandmaster in the kingdom in a month. The craftsmanship is superb, and it was blessed with a beautiful blessing. Specifically, this is what it looks like." As he spoke, a cloud of mist slowly condensed into the shape of a wine cup in front of the stone gate. It had a golden luster. That wine cup was indeed made by a grandmaster. Its design and decorations were indeed superb. "Oh, what a beautiful wine cup." Wang Lu couldn't help but praise. "No wonder you became so miserable after losing it." The stone gate didn't seem to hear the sarcasm in Wang Lu's words and also sighed. "That's right. Among the 103 wine cups that the king likes the most, it ranks in the top 20. I deserve to die 10,000 times for losing it." "Alright, then please help me find it. I remember that I lost it near the Ice Thorns Highland. But after such a long time, it will definitely be picked up by someone and continue to circulate on the continent. I will open a portal to the Ice Thorns Highland for you. You can start to collect clues from there. When you find the wine cup, break this crystal and you will be teleported back." As he spoke, a purple crystal fell from the stone gate, and the light of a portal lit up beside it. "Alright, I've said what I need to say. I wish you good luck." I haven't talked to anyone for a long time, I'm so tired." With that, the stone gate fell into a deep sleep, and the ripple-like face disappeared behind the rock. "Wang Lu, what do we do?" The group stood next to the portal, waiting for the leader Wang Lu's instructions. Wang Lu held the transmission crystal in his hand and remained silent. Aya said, "It's like they're deliberately making things difficult for us. How could we find the wine cup that has been lost for thousands of years? The Holy Light religion force is spread all over the continent, and they have a large number of people, yet they still couldn't find the real thing, only a clue. It's very likely that the real thing has been destroyed. After all, it's not a precious weapon or equipment, it's just a wine cup. I have seen a lot of things, but I've never even heard of it. It doesn't matter, I have a way. Have you forgotten that I'm the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Mountain?" Wang Lu said and confidently patted his chest. "And on that mountain, there's a treasure-hunting famous 8th Elder. That's not worth showing off at all." "Haha, even if the 8th Elder is unreliable, don't we still have the best sense of smell in the world, the most suitable spirit dog for finding things?" Wang Lu said and then stretched out his hand, but not to the mottled dog. Instead, he patted Bai Shishuan's head. "Spirit Platform Immortal Beast by Shishuan." The always indifferent little Bai suddenly blushed. "Senior brother, don't tease me." Aya was both annoyed and amused as she patted away Wang Lu's hand that was on little Bai's head. "Don't bully an honest person. Moreover, even if we ask Huahua to help, we haven't even seen the real wine cup, so no matter how sensitive our sense of smell is, it can't help us. In short, you can rest assured that I have a well-thought-out plan for this." With that, Wang Lu pulled the several people's hands and walked into the transmission array. The array flickered, and their figures disappeared from the floating island. At the same time, deep in the king's treasure house, the Holy One who was the administrator of the Holy Light religion issued a disdainful sneer. In front of him, a clear mirror reflected the scene on the floating island. Although he couldn't see the scene after leaving the transmission array, he heard the dialogue between Wang Lu and the stone gate word for word. "Well thought out plan? What a joke." The administrator muttered to himself. In the past, the church mobilized the power of the entire church and mobilized hundreds of millions of believers to collect information. But in the end, they could only conclude that the wine cup came from the Ice Thorns Plateau, appeared in more than 30 countries in the continent, had experienced hundreds of masters, and finally disappeared 2,000 years ago. There was no news of it and it was likely destroyed. Even the Prophet Holy One couldn't determine its location. So how could you yellow-skinned bastards think you can find it? Moreover, since we know that you are in the Ice Thorns Plateau, then your next stop is obvious. I have no interest in watching you play this game of treasure hunting. A group of people dare to leave Dragon City, leave the king's treasure house, you are seeking death." With a sneer, the Holy One clenched his fist, and the luxurious armrest of the chair cracked into pieces. "It's so cold." Walking out of the transmission array, the cold wind howled and snow filled the sky. The goose feather-like snowflakes danced in the wind, and the tiny ice dregs were like daggers. And in the wind and snow, the bone-chilling cold unexpectedly made this group of experts with the same cultivation base as King Pill somewhat unbearable. Lu Li's physique was relatively delicate, so she couldn't help but shiver. She hastily summoned her fire element flying sword and poured her pure magical power into it, igniting it for warmth. However, the always sharp flame was now on the verge of collapse. As the spirit of heaven and earth, Bai Shishuan was best at changing the environment, but at this time she was somewhat at a loss. The Ice Thorns Plateau is a cursed land. Aya's voice was somewhat erratic due to the strong wind. In the Golden King's era, this place was still prosperous. But later, after several wars, a legendary level Ice Queen fell here. Her curse has been left to this day, making the plateau no longer suitable for living creatures to live. The resentful spirits that were killed by the curse are entrenched here, adding to the gloominess of this place. Even if the wine cup is really left here, we can't just look for it in this cold wind. Let's leave first. There is a human city on the edge of the plateau, so we can take a rest there. After all, this group of people had formidable strength. Although they were slightly uncomfortable in this extremely harsh environment, it was not strenuous for them to break through the wind. Following the direction pointed by Aya, Wang Lu took the lead. His non-phase sword defense isolated all the wind and snow outside. The rest of them followed closely behind him. In just half a day they flew away from the plateau and arrived at a bustling border town, Asgard. Although the city was small, it had everything. Moreover, it was bustling with people and was thriving. Although the Ice Thorns Plateau was a cursed land, as the saying goes, riches and honor come from danger. The plateau country that was suddenly destroyed because of the curse buried endless treasures in the snowfield. Moreover, under the extreme conditions of the plateau, after thousands of years of gestation, many heavenly treasures were formed. Therefore it was highly respected by the adventurers. Many people were willing to go to the plateau to explore for treasures, and many of them had quite a lot of harvest. Located in the safe zone closest to the plateau, Asgard as a transportation hub, was naturally prosperous. It's simply a paradise for adventurers. There are even a lot of high-order professions here. After entering the city as far as Wang Lu could see, most of the people were adventurers. On the contrary, local people were rare. Most of the places in the city were inns, pubs, as well as equipment and prop shops. Aya said, I suggest that we start with the local church. The church here is the traditional ancient church that believes in the ice goddess. It has a very long history. If there is any important information in the plateau in the past 10,000 years, they generally know about it. That wine cup has been wandering for thousands of years, but the source is still on the plateau. Wang Lu smiled and shook his head. There's no need to be so troublesome. The time interval is 10,000 years. Even if the church has a record of everything, how long would it take for us to investigate it? Do we have so much time to waste now? Then what are you going to do? Let's go to the prop shop first. Since the business here is flourishing, there should be a wide variety of goods. After arriving at the prop shop, Wang Lu looked at the goods displayed in the shop and smiled. Looks like this is the place. Boss, I want 2 units of high-grade blessing gold ingots, then a multicolored stone, a red flame stone, an ice crystal stone, a storm stone, a thunder stone, a holy light stone, a dark shadow stone. Then a mithril thread, a fine gold leaf. Hearing the list of materials Wang Lu had listed, Aya was curious at first, but then she widened her eyes and looked at Wang Lu in disbelief. You don't tell me you want to? Wang Lu snorted coldly. Is there any other way? When that bastard asked me to find a cultural relic that had been missing for tens of thousands of years, I knew that it was time to show my real skills. Chapter 328. I say what you're doing is too whimsical. After leaving the prop store, I was still shocked all the way. How could this method work? You actually want to blatantly fake it? People will definitely recognize it at a glance. Recognize it at a glance? Wang Lu, who was holding a pile of materials, looked back at Aya and disdainfully said, perhaps in the past, but now it's been thousands of years. Even if his mother comes back to life, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to recognize her. How could he possibly recognize the authenticity of the wine cup? But do you have a better way? Don't forget, we're not in the king's treasure house but in the real world. The people of Holy Light religion are likely to know where we are. Fortunately, this place is on the edge of the Western continent, so the power of Holy Light religion is not strong enough. Otherwise, we might have been surrounded by a large number of high-order professions. Yes, we're in the real world? Aya softly said to herself. Don't even think about it. Wang Lu saw through Aya's idea at a glance. This is not Dragon City, so you should put down your Night King identity. Your people are not as fragile as you think. While talking, the group of people came to a luxurious inn in the city. Aya booked a room at the counter. The group of people walked into the room under the various gazes from all around and then closed the door. I always feel that the eyes of the people around us are strange. Luli was somewhat confused. Did we do something wrong? Wang Lu put down the box and said, a man leading a bunch of women to a room, what do you think the people around us would think? But now is not the time to think about this. Luli, little by Aya, the 3 of you may have to help later. No matter what, this wine cup was personally made by a jewelry master, so the quality is absolutely superior. If I make a counterfeit, perhaps I can't reproduce the vicissitudes of thousands of years of history, but the difference in quality can't be too obvious. Aya somewhat hesitated. Have you really learned imitation? Do you think the title of Spirit Sword Sect's top student is as unworthy as your Misty Peaks head chef title? Refining is an important part of the path of cultivation. According to my study plan, once I become a perfected king pill, I'll have to start practicing refining. Before that, I'll have to make sufficient preparations. Making imitation tools was a necessary preparation for refining tools. In the future, even if I officially start refining weapons, I will definitely start with imitation. As Wang Lu spoke, he had already sorted out the materials and prepared them. Then he took out a snow-white flame floating in the air from his mustard seed bag. And after all, it's essentially an artifact of the mortal world. Its biggest highlight is its creativity and not any special effects. Then using a low-grade spiritual fire like the mysterious Een fire should be more than enough. After that, Wang Lu fixed the flame in mid-air, took out the gold ingots and burned them on the fire. The gold ingots that had been blessed by the spell quickly melted when they came into contact with the flame. After that, Wang Lu's invisible mana floated in the air, and it quickly melted into a golden ball of liquid metal, which was propelled by his power and rotated rapidly. After that, Wang Lu separated out a trace of magical power and began to do some surprising processing on this golden ball. Aya, Lu Li and Bai Shixian watched with rapt attention. They saw Wang Lu, like spinning silk from a cocoon, separated a trace of golden thread from the golden ball, and then quickly peeled it off. As the golden ball rotated, the peeled-off part became more and more, and the remaining part gradually formed the shape of a wine cup. Aya was dumbfounded. "You're making pottery, okay?" Wang Lu said, "It doesn't matter, the principle is the same. It's completely different, okay? Normal wine glasses are made by hand. It doesn't matter, in any case the quality of the finished product is the same." "How could it be the same?" "Damn, what's the difference? Don't tell me that when you give birth to a child, the quality of the child is different because of the position? That's a complete sophistry." However, whether it was sophistry or eloquence, Wang Lu was indeed earnestly making the wine cup in his own way. During this period, Lu Li, Bai Shixian, and even Aya also contributed their own efforts, using their unique ability to decorate the wine cup. More than 10,000 years ago, the jewelry master of the Golden Kingdom was indeed amazing. If it was purely based on professional skill, Wang Lu as an amateur was naturally far from it. However, he made up for it with the means of a cultivator, thus he was able to imitate it. After a day and a night, when Bai Shixian and Lu Li joined forces to place the last piece of multicolored stone on the outer wall of the wine cup, the entire wine cup glowed with an amazing color. A ray of blessing light fell from the sky and fell on the wine cup. At this moment even Aya was shocked. "You actually guessed it?" The biggest technical difficulty of the knockoff wine cup was actually not the method of the wine cup itself, but the faint blessing attached to it. The stone gate once tried to imitate 1 or 2 parts of the blessing aura with water mist. However, that 1 or 2 parts of imitation already made Aya quite surprised, because it didn't seem like it was attached with a spell or other means. The combination of blessing and the wine cup itself was very natural. Now it seemed like the blessing on the wine cup didn't come from external force, but was naturally generated by its unique structure. Golden King liked that wine cup mostly because of the natural way contained in it. Unexpectedly, Wang Lu actually recreated this blessing. "The creativity belongs to other people, what I did is just a craftsman's work. I have the means of a cultivator, but I still can't do it." "What a cultivator. Now let's see if this thing can handle it." Wang Lu said, fiddled with the wine cup in his hand, and then directly took out the purple crystal and crushed it, activating the transmission spell. I was surprised. "Wait a minute, this is too hasty." However, the next moment, they appeared on the floating island, and in front of them was the heavy stone gate. Wang Lu directly threw the glittering wine cup in front of the gate. "I found it, please check it." He was speechless. After a long time, the surface of the stone gate once again rippled like water, which then formed into a human face. "You're back?" The voice of the stone gate was vague and somewhat surprised. "So fast." Then the stone gate's attention fell on the wine cup on the ground. Suddenly the entire floating island trembled. This is." The stone gate rumbled and countless sand and gravel fell from various cracks. 2 waterfalls of gravel flowed down from the human face formed by the water ripples. Finally see it again." "The king's wine cup, this is the king's?" The emotional voice of the stone gate stopped abruptly, and the trembling of the island also abruptly stopped. A moment later an even more violent tremor burst out. The human face on the stone gate twisted and let out an angry roar. "Are you playing with me?" The powerful sound wave hit his face like a substance. Wang Lu propped up his non-phase sword defense to isolate it. However, the vast sea of clouds behind him was directly shaken by this sound wave, leaving behind an empty space of several miles. "If you have something to say, then say it. What are you shouting for?" The stone gate held up the wine cup with an invisible force and said word by word, "Is this what you mean by found it? How dare you trick me with a fake? Do you think I'm an idiot?" After Wang Lu said that, Aya could not help but pass her voice through primordial spirit. "Wang Lu, I told you this is too hasty. Even if you made it exactly the same as the real thing, but the real thing is, after all, thousands of years old. If you take out a brand new one, how can you get away with it?" Wang Lu ignored Aya's complaint and still faced the stone gate. "This is the real thing, I didn't fake it." "You still say you didn't fake it?" The stone gate angrily said, This wine cup has been lost in the mortal world for more than 10,000 years and has experienced countless history. How could it be as new as before? Wang Lu lightly asked. Why can't it be as new as before? Do you know what it has experienced for more than 10,000 years? The stone gate was suddenly silent. He was punished by Golden King and guarded this place for more than 10,000 years. How could he know what had happened in the mortal world? However, it was wishful thinking to get away with it. Do you think I can be fooled? The last person who came to the trial has given quite reliable evidence. He mobilized hundreds of millions of people in the mortal world to collect clues, proving that the king's wine cup has been in the hands of more than 100 people and has experienced several major wars. There is serious damage on the wine cup. At least there should be a deep crack between the two gems. It can't be as flawless as this one. Wang Lu let out an "oh" sound and then said disapprovingly, and then? The stone gate angrily said, you want to say that that person's evidence is fake and he's deceiving me? Unfortunately, you've got the wrong idea. Every clue he said has sufficient historical evidence, but you, on the other hand, are just empty words without any evidence. Wang Lu sneered, empty words? Ridiculous. No matter how many historical materials and clues that person provided, they are all just circumstantial evidence. What I have in my hands is the real and most favorable evidence. Between the two, which one is more important? Even if you think with your knees you can understand it. It's not the side with more evidence. The stone gate was not good at debating. After being rebutted by Wang Lu, he angrily said, then how do you explain the crack? That crack was at least 1,000 years ago, right? Wang Lu said, according to what you said, the previous person's clues are not complete, and no one knows the final whereabouts of the wine cup. Yes, but the clues he provided cover more than 8,000 years of history. Only the last 2,000 years are blank and the value is high enough, Wang Lu interrupted. In other words, no one knows the last 2,000 years of the wine cup's history. 2,000 years isn't a short period of time. It's enough for countless dynasties to rise and fall. Anything can happen during this period of time. How can you be so sure that the crack on this cup will remain forever and can't be repaired? The stone gate was stunned. In fact, aren't you curious as to how we found the wine cup so quickly? Let me tell you, this wine cup, we found it in the Plateau of Ice Thorns. Plateau of Ice Thorns? The stone gate said in surprise. That's impossible. The wine cup was taken away from the plateau by someone 10,000 years ago. Yes, but it eventually came back. Guess who did it? Oh, it itself. Wang Lu pointed his finger at the wine cup. 1,000 years ago, because of a chance coincidence, it condensed its own spirituality and became a spiritual treasure. Spiritual treasure? The stone gate was shocked and whispered. Although there were many differences between the Western continent and 9 regions, there were also many similarities. It was not uncommon for magical treasures to have spirituality in the Western continent. Yes, although its body is just a wine cup, it was created by a grandmaster, and it was also favored by the Golden King. After thousands of years of suffering, it's not strange for it to gather its own wisdom, right? If you look carefully, you should be able to find a trace of spiritual afterglow on the wine cup. The stone gate quickly carefully observed the wine cup, and after a moment he slowly said, indeed, it really has a spiritual aura. At this time Aya, who was standing behind Wang Lu, was stunned. Is this possible? That so-called spiritual afterglow is clearly the residual fluctuation of the mysterious fire, right? Seeing that the stone gate had gradually fallen into the trap, Wang Lu inwardly sneered, but his facial expression became more and more dignified. The promotion of a magical treasure is equivalent to a human cultivator recasting their body. The previous thousands of years of vicissitudes are all smoothed out and become brand new. The reason why this wine cup is so dazzling is because it has experienced a resurrection. The stone gate was silent for a long time and then asked, so, where is the spirit now? Wang Lu coldly said, what do you think? There is only a trace of afterglow, so of course the original body has fallen. This wine cup spirit was resurrected 1,000 years ago. Then, in order to return to its master, it did not hesitate to consume its own existence and traveled thousands of miles back to the Plateau of Thorns of Ice, which is the place where you lost it. It endured the snow and the curse of the plateau, silently waiting for you to send someone to find it back. Because it thought that if it returned to its original place, it would have a greater chance of being found. Unfortunately, the previous idiots refused to search the plateau seriously. When they heard that it was taken away from the plateau, they hurriedly left that land of death and went to other parts of the continent to trace its history. However, they never thought that its original body was so hard-working. We were also lucky. We didn't walk far on the plateau before we saw it. In fact, it should be said that it took the initiative to find us. At that time, its life was almost exhausted, but when it sensed that someone was teleported from the floating island to the plateau, it gathered its strength and moved in front of me. When I held it up, it didn't even have time to say a few words before it completely fell. Wang Lu's cold voice was like thunder, bombarding the stone gate's thoughts. What's funny is that its last few words didn't pour out its pain and longing during the long wait. Instead, it was used to explain its abnormality, explaining how it had gathered its spirituality by coincidence and recovered to its original state. It was afraid that people would suspect its authenticity. Now, if you have the ability, tell me again that this wine cup is a worthless imitation of trash. Facing Wang Lu's harsh words, the stone gate could no longer hold on. Crushed stones and tears rolled down like rain. I'm really stupid. In the midst of crying, the stone gate slowly opened, revealing a staircase leading to the next stage. Chapter 329. Even after leaving the floating island for a long time, Aya was still immersed in shock. How could that be possible? Aya seriously recalled the eloquence of Wang Lu. After thinking about it, she could only admire him. Actually, there are still a lot of loopholes in your story. Hearing Aya's sigh, Wang Lu said with a smile, after all, the story is essentially a lie. According to strict logical reasoning, it is certainly not tenable. However, logic is not omnipotent. The story has been so sensational, what else can he do? After a pause, Wang Lu said, fortunately, the stone gate is a human, so it has the wisdom and feelings of human beings. It can be impulsive and misjudge. Otherwise, this level would be a bit difficult. But if it's not a human, how could it make such an unreasonable request? In fact, my story is essentially based on it. A fool who has been exiled and punished for more than 10,000 years, but is still loyal to the Golden King and brooding over his past mistakes. Along the stairs, the group walked in a dark independent space. Only the stairs under their feet shone. Before long, the scenery in front of them changed, and another stone gate appeared in front of them. Only this time it was not an open area. Behind the stone gate, there was obviously a long and narrow corridor. Deeper in the corridor, there was an endless unknown. Is the next level the second level? Wang Lu was eager to try. My adventurer's spirit is already unbearably hungry. Unfortunately, the second level did not have a shortcut like the first level. Because the stone gate was just a stone gate, it did not have its own wisdom. Perhaps its design was relatively rigid, or perhaps after more than 10,000 years, the original intelligent life has gone extinct. In short, there were vague handwriting on the stone gate, which explained the rules of the second level in ancient language. But perhaps because of the long time, many of them were already blurred and difficult to understand. After the efforts of Wang Lu and Aya, the final result was, the endless labyrinth contains endless unknowns. Every weakness of human nature will be captured. The tough test needs to be faced with blades and swords. Only when the 5 of us are united can we enter and reach the other side. Wang Lu repeated the rules a few times and tried to summarize them. Simply put, it's a huge labyrinth that requires a team of 5 to open. There are all kinds of traps, some to test one's character and some to test one's combat power. It's a comprehensive labyrinth dungeon. Aya said, if the difficulty of this championship trial is progressively higher, then the difficulty of this level is likely to be higher than the previous one. Moreover, as far as I know, in the era of the Golden King, most of those who could obtain the title of champion were strong people who were close to the legendary realm. With our current lineup, I'm afraid. What is there to be afraid of? With a former legend like you around, can't we just crush them all the way? I was a little shaken. I'm sorry, but I'm in a very bad situation right now. Wang Lu asked in surprise and concern, what's wrong? Does someone with a heroic spirit physique have a menstrual period? Doesn't that mean I'll get pregnant? Aya, haha, I know what you're worried about. It doesn't matter. Since I promised to be your invincible faith, when you're in a bad situation, I'll cut through the thorns and thorns. Wang Lu said and then came to the door in high spirits. Well, if there's any test, bring it on. I'll let you see the real skill of clearing the dungeon. Behind him, Aya somewhat helplessly shook her head and smiled, but her heart was gradually filled with warmth. Yes, although he always does things unexpectedly, but perhaps I can really believe in him. I believe that he can help me rebuild my country and restore the glory of Bretonia. If it's him, he can certainly do it. With that thought in mind, Aya felt that her heroic spirit physique had further solidified. The haze that was caused by Wang Lu's presumptuous decision was also dispelled. Well, although from a rational point of view Wang Lu hasn't really convinced me, but, for the time being, I'll trust him for the time being. However, Aya's impassioned words, which gradually warmed her heart, were met with silence from the stone door. The gray door was tightly closed, shutting out the group of challengers. Moreover, there was no sign of it opening. Wang Lu gawked for a moment, unable to figure out why the door didn't open. He walked forward and knocked on the door. Open the door, we're good people. No response. Open sesame? No response. Little rabbit, be good and open your legs? There was still no response, except for Aya angrily punching Wang Lu. That's strange. Wang Lu pondered. Did we do something wrong? Or is there something wrong with the way we enter the door? It's not like we have to resort to violence as soon as we open the door, right? Aya said, it's best not to try to break this door by force. I don't think that's a good idea. Luli also added, I also think it's better not to break the door. Since the two people with the sharpest intuition said so, Wang Lu gave up the idea and turned his eyes back to the writing on the stone door. Only when 5 people are united can we enter and reach the other side. Could it be this sentence? Wang Lu said, only when a team of 5 people can we continue to move forward. Is there a problem with this sentence? But even if we must gather 5 people to move forward, we have already gathered them. Luli curiously said, have you gathered them? Senior brother, 1 for you, 1 for Aya, 1 for Little Bai, and 1 for Hua. There are obviously 4 of them. Wang Lu looked at her as if he was looking at an unlucky naughty child. Or Luli, your IQ is no longer recognized in the human category? Having said that, Wang Lu certainly didn't think that Luli was really out of the human category. There were many times when this little girl was stupid and adorable, but at most, her brain lacked a few tendons. Correspondingly, her other tendons were exceptionally developed. Her memory and calculation ability were so strong that even he, the top student of Spirit Sword Sect, was dumbfounded. If it wasn't Luli, then who was it? Wang Lu's first reaction was naturally Quanzhou. This model dog was the most different from the human standard. However, strictly speaking, there was no reason to exclude it from the team. First, as the highest-level mythological beast, Hua would transform into a human sooner or later. Although in the Western continent mythology, there was no precedent of Fenrir transforming into a human, on Spirit Sword Mountain, the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall believed that it was only a matter of time. Second, Western continent and 9 regions were different. The distinction between Chinese and barbarian was not so strict, and the boundary between human and beast was also relatively vague. It must be known that most of the professions in Western continent had the bloodline of strange beasts. For example, Aya was the inheritor of the dragon bloodline. And in the era of Golden King, this kind of hybridity was brought to the extreme. Some of the generals under the command of Golden King were magical beasts, and none of them had ever transformed into a human. So, what reason did this stone door have to shut Fenrir outside? After thinking about it, this stone door was still closed, which was really hard to figure out. And at this time, Luli suddenly said, the stairs to come here are gone. Wang Lu looked back and sure enough, the shining stairs had faded and disappeared. The team was isolated in front of the stone door in a small square. What should I do? I'm hungry. Luli very decisively put forward the most realistic question. It was not that she was gluttonous, but in the past 3 days when she concentrated on making wine cups in the inn, she actually didn't eat anything. With her current physique, she indeed didn't need to eat. However, eating has become a habit and it was more of a psychological dependence. Just like a smoker who hasn't smoked for 3 days, that kind of hunger and thirst was hard to resist. Wang Lu still had some food in his mustard seed bag, so he threw a few meat pies to Luli, which made her smile. However, the current predicament was still a headache. Really troublesome, we can't just stand still in the second level. Not to mention with the composition of foodies in the team, sooner or later the food will run out. At that time, do I have to rely on my physical advantage of non-phase method to infinitely squeeze out protein to maintain their survival? Wang Lu's thoughts drifted, and soon from the food storage problem to the agricultural breeding problem, he thought that if he brought the crop seeds as well as breeding pigs and sheep, he could open up a small piece of farmland here to play with the monogatari. Breeding? Wang Lu felt a flash of inspiration in his mind and suddenly understood the reason why the stone door was closed. So that's how it is. The reason why the number is not enough is because there is an overlap. Wang Lu said, walked to the front of the mottled dog and then stretched out his foot to kick it. Damn, what are you doing? The dog was sleeping sweetly, so being interrupted made its whole body uncomfortable. I'm looking for you to make up the number. With that, Wang Lu reached out his hand and touched the dog's head. In his jade mansion, a mark disintegrated. That was the master-servant contract between Wang Lu and Quan Zhuhua, which was now unilaterally lifted by Wang Lu. Quan Zhuhua felt that the shackles on its brain suddenly broke, and its whole body suddenly burst out with a bit of vitality, making it feel very comfortable. However, it didn't have the time to experience this. It hurriedly stood up. Damn, do you want to casually abandon a small animal? Rest assured I'll take care of your food. Wang Lu said, I just need you to become an independent existence to make up the number of people. Wang Lu thought that if the number of people was not recognized, the biggest possibility would be because of the contract between him and Quan Zhuhua. Right now, as his pet, the stupid dog was attached to him. Naturally, it would not be recognized as an independent team, so there were actually only 4 of them. However, as long as the stupid dog was released with its qualification, how could it not count? And sure enough, when the contract was lifted, the stone door soon opened with a rumbling vibration, revealing a deep and huge maze. A dangerous and mysterious aura hit them in the face. The structure of the maze was breathtaking. Not long after the entrance corridor in front of them, there was a sudden opening showing infinite light. A bright and warm sun hung high in the sky. Not only did it not have the gloomy underground city corridor that made people despair, but instead, everything was directly revealed in front of them. Under the clear sky, the open labyrinth was divided into countless small units. Some of the units were empty grasslands, some were deep forests, and some were pitch black even though they were clearly illuminated by the sun. These units were separated by space barriers. Although there was no brick or other fixed-form material, it was more unbreakable than any brick and was difficult to break through with brute force. In front of everyone was a narrow corridor isolated by space barriers. In front of the corridor was the transmission entrance to the first unit. Ayaya, the most troublesome transmission maze. Wang Lu felt annoyed when he saw this scene. Among all the mazes, this kind of transmission maze was the most troublesome one based on complex space spells. Moreover, there was no telling how many sharp traps were arranged in each of the small units. This stage was similar to the first stage, but it was more like a test of the trial taker's patience. Unfortunately, when encountering this level, I am the most impatient type. Wang Lu coldly said and strode forward. Aya curiously asked, how are you going to be impatient? Any maze has a common solution. Dig the wall, dig the ground. While speaking, he launched his original magical ability, and the bloody sky covered an area of 100 feet. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.